Steve is a dead man walking, because when Austin 316 meets Pillman,
oh my God,
9mm cut,
oh my God,
I'm gonna blast his shirt
He's out
straight
there,
to
man.
hell.
He's Steve Austin's out there now, man.
What?
Are we going to see Shawn Michaels, the risk taker, Shawn Michaels, the flamboyant superstar?
You're damn right I am.
We are.
You're going to see me take a whole hell of a lot more risks. I'm going to be more flamboyant. I'm going to do what I want to do. That's what got me to be the #1 man in the World Wrestling Federation, because I used to slap people around and kick their teeth in when I felt like it. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. If I got to gouge an eye, I'll gouge an eye. If I got to kick you in the teeth, I'll kick you in the teeth. I'm going to do what I want, when I want. And if somebody wants to do something about it, just try me anytime, because I've had enough. As the old saying goes, and I know you've heard it a million times, but believe me when I tell you, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I can play as dirty as anybody. Just ask around.
We are the nation of domination.
We are the nation, come alive and in color. Don't diss the man, over bum rush your mother. Now listen what I'm saying, it's for real, not playing. Farouk is the man, hit your knees and start praying.
Nation of domination.
Got power like the bear, but quick like the cat. Put 2 and 2 together, feel your face on the mat. You count the stars while the refs count 3. Hope you like to look at sailors, cause that's all you're gonna see.
We are the nation of domination.
He's harder than a rock, and he can't be stopped.
Hello, my name is Bob Bamber, and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast, going back in the time machine to November of 1996 for Volume 1 of this month's show. 4 volumes for you this month. Volume 2 takes us to WCW, looking at World War III. Volume 3 to ECW, looking at November to Remember, and in a special Volume 4, we step away from the world of wrestling and look at boxing, the Mike Tyson-Evander Holyfield fight. We're here for Volume number 1, looking at the WWF and Survivor Series. I'm being joined firstly by, welcome back, Colin Judkins. Colin, hello.
Hello.
And all the way from Canada, Jeff Parker. Jeff, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bob.
Jeff, kick us off with the news.
All right. The WWF's attempt to create some noise in their new earlier time slot was met with mixed response following a controversial angle involving Brian Pillman pulling a gun on Stone Cold Steve Austin at his home on November 4th. The show, which was otherwise pre-taped long in advance, was frequently interrupted as they returned to Kentucky where they had a film crew. Pillman said, when Austin 316 meets Pillman's 9mm gun, I'm going to blow his sorry ass straight to hell. They lost the feed right at the moment Austin broke into the home, and it was only returned right towards the end of the show with Austin and Pillman being separated by a group of Pillman's friends. While the USA Network were not aware that Brian Pillman was going to swear live on the air, it was not edited out on the West Coast version of the show.
Psycho Sid is the new WWF champion, defeating Shawn Michaels in the main event at a Survivor Series at Madison Square Garden. The story of the match, as much of the deteriorating reception of Michaels as anything else, finished after Shawn tended to Jose Thero on the outside after Sid hit him with a television camera. In the other big match of the evening, Bret Hart defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin in 24 minutes after Bret pinned while being in a submission hold with the old Roddy Piper WrestleMania 8 finish. The Undertaker defeated Mankind in the other singles match, whilst newcomers Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon survived in their match. Debutant Rocky Maivia was the sole survivor in his, and the other 8-man match went to a no-contest disqualification.
The 1997 Royal Rumble will be held at the 72,000-seat Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas, and will be headlined by Shawn Michaels facing the WWF World Champion. Plans for In Your House next month will see Bret Hart face Sid after Hart earned a title shot against Austin. Given both men's ties to the area, the story will be both Shawn Michaels, but also, judging by Raw at the end of this month, Jose Lothario. The belief being that story will play out exactly like the Rocky film, with Lothario having a serious heart problem following the pay-per-view. There is also talk that they will black out the pay-per-view in and around the San Antonio area.
Mr. Perfect is reportedly on his way to WCW, having effectively blindsided the WWF, having turned down the opportunity to return to the ring. It's said that the WWF went behind Hennig's back and potentially cost him a 6-figure lump sum from his Lloyd's of London insurance policy. Beyond that, it simply said Henning's decision was out of revenge and that he does plan to return to the ring when he arrives in Atlanta. The WWF did manage to stop a rumoured appearance by Perfect on Nitro in November. It's much more likely he'll debut early next year when his WWF contract expires.
Randy Savage's return to the WWF looks unlikely, with the two sides seemingly too far apart. It said that the WWF want to sign guys to long 3+ year contracts, but that Savage's shelf life probably wouldn't warrant that much money for that long of a time period. The opposite thought was not wanting to sign Savage to a short-term deal, only for him to return to WCW immediately afterwards. His current status with WCW is still not clear. He hasn't been featured on television since Halloween Havoc.
Vince McMahon has sent out a promo to talent in the last week of October regarding changes to the WWF's drug test policy. It said that the existing policy wasn't cost-effective or necessary, and that going forward the policy will still enable them to test anyone at any time should they wish to. Plans for a new Saturday night television show called Shotgun Saturday Night are coming together. They just need to find someone who will actually air it. And there was also rumours going around regarding Monday Night Raw, talk that the show might end up being moved to midnight. Rumours are all they are at the moment. Mind.
Cole, sorry, that was cock up with my writing a bit there. Anyway, just a quick reminder to everyone that we are, of course, now on Patreon. You can, for $5 a month, get early access to some shows. You can blame Network Rail for the fact that we didn't get access to more than one show this month, given that I ended up editing almost everything today. But yes, for $5 a month, if you'd like to say thank you just for contributing to your lives in some way, shape or form, you can find the Patreon links in the description to this show on our website, wrestling20rs.com. or by going to patreon.com/wrestling20rs. Now, on to the ratings for the month. 4 more wins for Nitro in the Monday night ratings, specifically important due to Raw now being up against the first hour rather than the second. First hour, the move on November the 4th, Raw did a 2.3 to Nitro's 3.4 with the Austin Pillman angle. November the 11th, Nitro did a 3.7 to Raw's 2.5. On November the 18th, the night after Survivor Series, Raw dropped to a 2.4 and Nitro to a 3.2. And on November the 25th, Raw did a 2.1 to Nitro's 3.1. It will come as a little surprise that WCW are now front-loading Nitro, and the hour where Raw is on, the ratings are a lot closer. On the 11th, for example, Nitro finished on a 4.4 rating, having started with a 2.7. The rating jumped 0.7 right after Raw went off the air. Now, normally at this point we cut into some promos, but we're basically just going to do a quote-unquote live review of the first show of the month, because quite a lot happens. Colin, what did you? Yeah, we're going to go through it. I'm going to read through my TV notes, and we'll kind of pick bits off as we get to it. What did you think of this show?
We're talking about Austin and Pillman.
That would be the one.
Yeah, it's a completely different direction for Raw. It flabbergasted me that they were allowed to show it. I don't know how much USA actually knew of what they were going to be airing, but it was something that it seems to have completely taken WWF out of their comfort zone. I don't think they really knew how to handle what they were showing. I thought that the cut in between the show and Pillman's house was quite awkward. But it could end up being fascinating for WWF.
In what sense? What, as in this kind of storytelling going forward, or just the storyline itself?
It's so much more edgy than they have ever done before. I mean, it's so much different. It's more than just black and white. I mean, they've gone from it's literally shoved WWF New Generation and, you know, the gimmicky wrestling that we've seen in the past, and now all of a sudden there's somebody pulling a gun on someone. It's so far removed from what WWF have done ever before. I just think it's an interesting direction that they've decided to take themselves.
Jeff?
Yeah, you know, it got my attention. I think if you look at the television landscape right now, when I saw this, I thought of Fox's Cops, the show, kind of very cinema verite, which I don't think you'd ever hear WWF referred to in the same sentence before. If you think of Jerry Springer, if you think of the X-Files and that type of Fox mentality of just edgier, in your face, more crass, more ECW almost. It seems to be the type of trend that they looked at when they shot this angle. Austin is edgy. Pillman's certainly edgy. I think the gun within a pro wrestling confine, the gun was too far. But if you consider the time slot they're in, violence with the handgun is not an anomaly on television. So I think it could be considered as faux controversy or false outrage because it's a work, right? I mean, no one's actually going to get shot, and if it adds to the dramatic element of the show, all the more better. And if it gets people talking, and if it works, it works. The only issue I would see is that it just feels very. I don't want to say desperate because I kind of liked it. I kind of felt real. And again, when you juxtapose it with what WWF usually does, it was a nice, refreshing change. But it did come across as, very starkly different from the rest of their show, the rest of their programming.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing of the whole thing was I'm not sure it really achieved anything. Like it was just like pulling a gun out for the sake of pulling a gun out. I'm not sure what the kind of wider purpose behind any of it was. I mean, we're talking about the idea was, broad stroke, what since Bret Hart returned was to build up Steve Austin for a match with Bret Hart. And they kind of did that on the Raw at the end of October and went through that last month. And then Bret Hart didn't appear on any television for the 2 weeks prior to this either. And so the aim was to try and get Austin over as this, killer, I guess you'd say. Maybe not the best choice of words given that Pillman had the gun. But at the end of it, Colin, I don't know who benefited from this. Brian Pillman's going to be out for X number of months, so it's not like they can jump off the back of this and make a huge splash next month, say. And I don't know that Austin looked great. We had we'll come to it in a minute, but Colin, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, we know that Pillman's going to be gone for a while, so there's no payoff for Austin and Pillman's confrontation. The way Austin was portrayed, stalking around his house and attacking Pillman's friends, some of the worst feeding you'll ever see. But this was all on the same show where you had Sal Sincere against Jesse James. Really, really gimmicky stuff. I can't understand it. It doesn't work for me in that sense. But
that wasn't the biggest juxtaposition on this show. We'll get to that in a minute.
I know, but I think Austin searching out Pillman obviously made him look a bit crazy. Pillman with a gun obviously looks crazy. I sort of felt the impression that Austin came off a little. I know he was supposedly running away from a gun, which everybody would do, but he ran away. They're trying to put him across as this badass, but he ran away.
He did have a gun, though.
That's what I'm saying. He did have a gun, but to me, I took from it that Austin ran. It's silly, I know, but that's what I took from it.
I wouldn't be my biggest fan. Anyway, I will start reading through my notes from the show. There are a lot, and we'll come to bits as we get to them. Anyway, we're having the show with Kevin Kelly outside of Brian Pillman's house. He says Pillman's children have been taken to their grandparents as a result of what might happen tonight. Comes out flanked by Survivor Series. Colin, we talk about this. This is a really weird show as a whole, just because in the midst of all this really strong stuff, you just got really mundane wrestling.
Yeah.
Comes out flanked by a Survivor Series team ahead of his match with Goldust. We get a picture-in-picture with Doc Hendricks. He says he's been contacted by Steve Austin, who's left Cincinnati Airport, and he wants to talk to Vince.
Vince, Jerry.
What?
Listen, I hate to interrupt this match. I know it looks like it's going to be a great one.
Is that you?
Yes, it's me. I'm in the studio live on the phone. I'm contacted by Stone Cold Steve Austin. He says he's in the rent-a-car, has left the Cincinnati airport, is headed to Brian Pillman's, and he wants to talk to you, Vinnie Mac.
Do you have him on the phone?
Am I on the air?
Yes, you are.
Steve Austin?
Yeah.
Are you actually in the car on the way to Mr. Pillman's house?
Damn right. I said I was going to be last week, and anything I say comes true, Vince.
Yeah.
You know that. I'm the biggest star in the world, so who's going to stop me?
What are your intentions? I don't understand. Why are you going to Brian Pillman's house?
Hey, he's the one that brought this whole mess on. He took my interview time, tried to turn it into a shrine to worship Bret the Hitman Hart, and inspired a new verse out of the book of Austin. Austin 25:17. I will strike down upon your ass with great vengeance and furious anger, and that's what's going to happen.
Mr. Austin, I must warn you, there is a welcoming committee there. Brian Pillman has his friends around that house. It is not wise for you to go there.
And I got a six-pack of whoop-ass riding shotgun with me, son. Remember, don't intimidate me in the least bit. If I got something to do, then it's going to get done.
Stone Cold, listen to the King. Listen, that idiot Pillman threatened last week, said he's going to have a gun there.
All right, knock it off.
Well, he said
ain't
that.
got the guts. I'll do whatever it takes to get my hands on Pillman. You'll find out.
Mr. Austin, we're talking about trespass here. We're not talking about something in the wrestling world. We're talking about trespass if you make good on your promise.
Well, listen, Vince, if something happens to me, I'm sure you'll make amends for it because I'm a big star. I'm in the big match at Survivor Series. You can't do without me. I can do whatever I want, and I've got the mindset, and I'm ticked off enough that I don't really give a rat's ass. I will do what I say, regardless of the consequences.
Austin is in on the phone. He says he will strike down upon Pillman's ass with great vengeance and furious anger. Vince warned... What was that?
You just watched Pulp Fiction the night before, obviously.
Well, there we go. Vince warns in that Pillman has had his house surrounded by his friends. Austin simply replies, I've got a six-pack of whoop-ass riding shotgun with me. King brings up Pillman threatening to have a go on him. Austin says he doesn't have the guts. After commercial, we get a really nice video montage of Steve Austin in a warehouse. He says he ain't no sexy boy, but Bret Hart will know he was beaten by a real man. The Stalker Goldust match ends up as a double disqualification as the Survivor Series teams break down on the outside. We see a clip from the Big Bang Boom tour. Undertaker manages to speak over the arena audio system and says this is what he has planned for Bearer. Cage gets lowered from the ceiling and it comes, as the cover comes off, a Bearer type body is hanging in it upside down.
Yes, Vince, it's a very tense scene here in suburban Cincinnati tonight. Brian, I have to ask you, after the unprovoked savage attack last week on WWF Superstars, you had, I understand, reconstructive surgery once again on your ankle. Can you give us the prognosis? What have the doctors told you about your recovery?
Look, Kelly, I'm alive and well. I got an excellent prognosis for 97. But let's talk about Mr. Austin's prognosis. I've been in bitter feuds many, many times in this sport. There's a fine line between business and private lives. Austin, you've crossed that line. You've made this personal. And now we're operating on a whole different set of rules, son.
And Brian, we heard earlier that Stone Cold Steve Austin could be on his way to your home here tonight.
Actually,
can't move.
Kev, if I can interject this, I'm told that, in fact, that we have Mr. Austin circling the neighborhood, and I just wonder whether or not, from your standpoint, Mr. Pillman, if you can hear me, it seems to me that considering your vulnerability with your wife, Melanie,
well, Steve Austin's very vulnerable as well.
I think
his rage has blinded him to the fact that his best friend knows him better than anybody.
Do you feel
his strengths, his weaknesses, and certainly his fears?
Notwithstanding your bravado, do you feel a hostage? Do you feel like you're a hostage in your own home tonight?
Steve is a dead man walking because when Austin 316 meets Pillman.
Oh my God!
Oh
my God!
I'm gonna blast his service straight to hell.
Steve Austin's out there now, man.
What?
We visit Pillman inside his home. He says Austin has made things personal. Vince interjects and says that there are reports Austin is circling the neighborhood. Pillman says he knows Austin's strengths and his fears, and that Austin 316 is going to meet this. And with that, he actually pulls out a gun. We follow that with a wonderfully appropriate segue into a karate fighter's quarterfinal heat between Sid and Sable. You cannot make that up. We return from commercial and Austin is brawling with some of Pillman's friends. He even puts one of them in a paddling pool full of water or like a kid's play pool and leaves them laying. Jeff, there's enough to talk about with that kind of opening 15 of the Pillman stuff, but the thing that I remembered probably almost as much as the gun was like everything cutting, and then we cut to a Karate Fighters commercial.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you want to sell a toy to kids and then have that. I mean, it's WWF at its most contradictory and like. I don't know. I think when they're going up against WCW right now, they're trying to differentiate themselves in so many different ways. But Vince's, knee-jerk mentality is to always go to the big guys, try to get the cartoon superhero characters over, and you're going to get stupid stuff like marketing toys and then going to, a scene from Cape Fear.
Jeff, what does Brian Pillman pulling out a gun do for anybody? Austin, Pillman, WWF?
Let me ask you this, Bob. Who's the world champion right now?
At this point or at the end of the month?
At this point, during Raw.
Sure, Michael.
Who are we talking about right now?
Brian Pillman.
Brian Pillman is the same Brian Pillman who thought he could maybe get some extra publicity by handcuffing himself to the field goal post at last year's Super Bowl to get attention while he was trying to work WCW and WWF off each other for the best contract. This guy he knows the game. He is a consummate worker. I actually picked up a book called The Big Con, which is this really cool confidence scheme book from the 1930s that Pillman has read back to back to really understand how to get a good work down. Everything Pillman does has method and motive, and to do the gun, even when he's out, there isn't going to be a payoff anytime soon, but he's made himself relevant despite that. And now, you have Michaels fighting Sid with this Rocky Balboa type stuff on the side, but no one cares because there's a gun in Brian Pillman, even though the guy can't even work. I think he has manipulated the situation so people talk about him, and he's very good friends with Steve Austin, and who comes across as the biggest active star now? Steve Austin. So I think they accomplished what those two set out to accomplish.
Colin, thoughts on that and just on the segment so far?
I just don't get it, to be honest. Pillman has always been an attention seeker. He's always known how to work people. Everybody's talking about him, and the main event angle is Sid versus Shawn Michaels, but everybody's talking about Pillman pulling the gun. It's all about exposure. It's about shock tactics. Vince wants eyes on the product and away from WCW, and he's obviously seen this as a way of doing it.
Yeah, couldn't necessarily disagree with any of that. We move on. Austin attempts to get in through the front door, but it's locked. He continues around the side of the building. We, of course, at this point, cut back to Raw for a match between the Sultan and a promo from Bob Backlund. The atmosphere is pretty subdued, although I'm pretty sure they're not watching this. In fact, no, they can't be because it's not live. What am I about? So, yeah, the atmosphere is pretty subdued, but obviously Raw taped 3 weeks ago. They can't be seeing something that's shot live. Not because they could have done if that would have been pre-taped as well. Sultan wins a squash, and we're promised to go back to Cincinnati. Why even leave was my question. Austin breaking in by smashing a door. Austin wanders in to find Pillman pointing a gun at him, and we lose the feed at that exact moment. Colin, I think this was well, I probably don't break much ground to say this. This was the strongest point of the segment itself. I'm guessing they kind of had to lose the feed because then because otherwise it would have been a case of what's next. But it felt a little anticlimactic.
I mean, for what it was very short after that incredible match between the Sultan and what I think his name was the Pug, was it?
Alex Porto, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think they actually flashed up his name as the Pug, which made no sense. It was very short. They had to do something like lose the feed because where do they go from Pillman pointing a gun straight at Austin, it's basically to his face and chest area. They had to do something to leave a lot to your imagination, and as controversial as showing the gun was, they also needed an out because, like I said, what do you do apart from showing him shoot the gun?
Yeah, no, I suppose that's right. Jeff, thoughts on this bit? Was it strong enough?
Yeah, if it's a male soap opera, you got to tune in next week to see something. So you give them a cliffhanger, and they hopefully, if it gets enough interest, people will tune in to see the results.
Yeah. The results, yeah, that's one way of putting it, I suppose. Yeah, the aftermath, I suppose. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this Sid Shawn segment doesn't feel all that important right now. Raw technically isn't live, but this still feels a bit weird. Anyway, we cut back to an in-ring promo chat with Shawn Michaels and Sid, chaired by Jim Ross. Shawn calls him a bit crazy. Sid says first of all, that's bullshit. Shawn then tells Sid he needs to thank him for his spot in the WWF. Sid said he made a mistake with the confrontation last week. Shawn says they made up. Vince then interrupts and says they've got a feedback from Cincinnati. Oh, no, they haven't. Shawn says Sid isn't in his league. Sid says, that's right, I'm not in the little league. Shawn Michaels then channels Ric Flair. As the saying goes, to be the man, you've got to beat the man. The podium gets flattened, they're about to brawl, and Jim Cornette comes out as Vader, Owen Hart, and Bulldog come out. Owen hits Sid with a chair, but Michaels grabs the chair as the other three run off. Sid comes to, sees Michaels with the chair, and thinks Michaels did it. Jeff, I think if there was one big loser of this show, it was this angle feeling almost completely irrelevant.
Yeah, it's not the main focus. I think it's undermined by the fact that both are baby faces. Undermined by the Austin Pillman thing, certainly, but just the feud itself going into one of the big four pay-per-views, it's lacking a lot of intensity or even though it's for the title, it lacks maybe consequence. I don't know. It just doesn't feel hot.
Colin?
There's no way that this angle could feel hot after showing someone point a gun at someone's face. I mean, we know that Raw was pre-taped, and I mean, they've tried to fit in this Austin angle around everything that they've shot already. But this match it's for the WWF Championship, and it should be it should be the focal point of the show. But like you said, it just doesn't feel like it's not hitting the bases. Who cares? Go back to Cincinnati. That's all the people really want to see.
Yeah, I thought it was a flat segment anyway. I mean, Sid's entertaining in a, like, you're not drawing any money with this kind of way, but in a, Sid's just so out there that it kind of works. But the whole feud has been, and it's, babyface matches rarely work. We rarely see, we saw a babyface match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart that I don't think worked about 8 or 9 months ago, certainly in terms of the build. And it's just very difficult to tell a story when you're trying to build it on a bit of respect. They're trying to give Sid a bit of an edge, but he's not a strong enough promo to really execute a kind of piece of storytelling that complex. And Shawn's just Shawn. I mean, we're going to see some more attitude from him at the end, but while he's trying to be, nice guy babyface, just doesn't work. Anyway. The main event is Razer Ramon versus Mark Marrow. Vince establishes a phone connection with one of the crew called Kerwin. They're in the truck. The power went down, they say, and the lights are all out in the house. Kerwin says he heard a couple of noises that sounded like explosions. Vince finally says that everyone's safety is more important than the feed. Fucking at last. Vince wants to know if the authorities, you would think, like, at any point during the show, just go, we hope everyone's okay. We're sorry this got out of control. And finally, 40 minutes in, we got there. Vince wants to know if the authorities have been called. Razor hits a razor's edge and pins Marrow off a distraction from Hunter Helmsley and Mr. Perfect. We finally get back live to to Kentucky rather. Pillman's being held back by his friends. We finish the show with Austin and Pillman being pulled apart. And at this point, Pillman also says fucking, but it's very, very faint. But that was what the swearing was in relation to. Colin, I mean, even in the confines of this 50-minute show, in this storyline, did it fall a bit flat at the end? Like, it felt like they had this really strong bit of cut, and then we kind of got back and not much happened. I felt like they needed a stronger follow-up, although I don't know what that could have been.
Well, I mean, when you eventually go back, you get the recap of what's already happened, because they lost the feed, rather than actually show you what happened. Maybe they could have shown you what happened, the feed that they lost. No, they showed you what happened already, and then the feed cut out again. But okay. And then you go back, Pillman's being held down by his friends that nobody's ever seen or heard of. And then Austin comes back in again. shouting the odds and getting pulled away. It was just, they didn't need to go back again. It seemed killed it a little bit. They should have just left it where the feed went out, and then you come back next week and we'll have some more information.
And the show goes off the air with Razer Ramon celebrating.
What? Yeah, let poor Mark Marrow getting pinned by fake Razer.
Yeah, that as well. Jeff, it's kind of right. Would we just been better not going back compared to how we finished?
I think there was a contrived effort on the part of Titan Sports to make sure that there was an F word dropped, and to make sure there was a lot of explicit stuff done, whether it was the screaming, the use of the gun one more time. They wanted to get their bang for their buck, because let's put it like this. If this gets controversy and all of a sudden, the parents groups and the karate fighters sponsors start pulling out, they've got this 1 week that they can go to, okay? It's better to ask forgiveness than for ask permission, right? So from my point of view, I think that they just wanted to get the bang for their buck out of this angle, because if it works, they can point to the ratings and say it worked. If it doesn't work, well, they did it once, and they did it to the, if they overkilled it, they overkilled it. But, I think they just wanted to get as much out of it as possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, but did they at the end?
I think when you have an F-bomb on TV, even if it's kind of, semi-challenging to decipher, you've put across something that you're not supposed to hear. It's that blurred lines type deal. Is it real? Or, I mean, obviously it's
Somebody at some point is going to go, did you see WWF last night? Somebody swore.
Yeah, I mean, and if you caught it, you're like, whoa, he wasn't supposed to say that. And then you get that extra kind of special feel. Like, imagine if Shawn Michaels had said something, it's like, wow, Shawn Michaels said that. No, we're talking about Brian Pillman. We're talking about Austin. So I think, whatever controversy comes out of this, I think everything was manipulated for a reason. You hear Vince had flown out there to see how everything had been staged. I think this was all very purposefully done to get the controversy, and whether or not the payoff at the end of the episode worked, I think it was deliberately done so.
Yeah, they had to go back. And Jeff's kind of right. This isn't the kind of thing you can leave until next week. You can't reset something like this. They had to have something. I just don't know whether they needed to have something more. I don't know what that could have been. It was difficult to follow up on. Go on, Colin.
Well, I'd say more than a gun.
Well, no, at the end, as in the final segment. Yeah, no, I didn't mean overall. I just meant in terms of how they finished. It just felt like, compared to what we saw earlier, the final 30 seconds of the scene felt a little flat. I agree with Jeff. The swearing was, I think, deliberate. I don't think there's much doubt about that. You can bleep that out. You could bleep that out live if you wanted to. There are ways and means of doing that, but you could certainly edit it out of the feed that airs on the West Coast if you want to. But it is a little strange in my mind, and maybe as someone who, if you listen to the regular show, you'll know I swear quite a bit anyway. But maybe it's a little weird in my mind that Brian Pillman saying the word fucking was a stronger story coming out of this show than Brian Pillman having a gun. That, to me, is a little bit strange, but I sort of understand what that kind of logic. But yeah, like I just got to the end of the show, and it's like, Colin, what did we achieve here? Like, Pillman got some eyes on himself, fair enough, but he's not going to be around to cash in on that kind of stuff for a while. In terms of, apparently he got injured during this angle. Apparently he did his knee in this angle amongst everything else. That as well. But was Austin portrayed strongly enough here to make this worthwhile in terms of what's coming up 11, 12, 13 days later?
Well, I mean, they got across that, Austin, if he doesn't like you, he's not willing to wait for the wrestling show. He's willing to go to your house and confront you. They're trying to put him across as real as possible. And, I mean, I know it's a wrestling show, it's all worked, but they want you to believe that if you piss Stone Cold off, he's going to come and find you and sort you out. And that's what they've tried to get across. I mean, the whole Pillman and the gun thing, it serves no purpose other than putting eyes on the WWF product. I don't think that helped Austin at all. But, WWF, they're just trying to, they've put Stone Cold out there. They've then put eyes on the product with the gun placement, and he was involved in that angle, so he will still get spoken about. So I suppose that's what they've tried to do.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think Austin comes off. I think he comes off as a violent, serious guy. He's going up against like their ultimate babyface in Brett. So you have good versus evil. You have this guy, and he's the guy that's coming to the house. There's a gun in the house, and he's kicking down the door. He's menacing. I think it served off Austin in the case where, when represented by everybody else on the show, he certainly comes across as special and different. Just looking at the way they ended this angle, the only thing they could have done was something like, if Pillman had done what Keanu Reeves does in Point Break, where he doesn't actually shoot the guy, he just shoots into the ceiling. Like, it would be something so silly and contrived. Like, I was reading they could have shot off blanks or something. They were kind of written themselves into a corner by using a gun in a wrestling angle. But overall, I think it sets up Pillman down the road. Again, he knows what his stock is. It might not be until he can be healed 6-8 months from now or whatever, but he's in it for the long haul. And I think both these guys worked themselves into an angle for down the line.
Yeah. I think there was the MO of this story was to try and create shock value and was to try and give it something moving to a new time slot. I think it did that. I think it probably did that at the expense of the guys involved. Not that they were affected detrimentally, but more that you could have tweaked how they told the story and had a less shocking angle, but one that perhaps was more story driven in terms of the immediate future. On the whole, though, it's got us doing a 20-odd minute review of the show, and it got a lot of people talking. Whether that was positive long term or not, it's the Raw we're going to remember from this year more than any other. That's worth something, if nothing else. And Pillman is stronger as a result. I think Austin is just about stronger as a result, even if time perhaps would have been better spent building up him and Bret Hart, certainly in the short term. I think from that, it's just about 2 thumbs up. Raw on November the 11th begins with no update whatsoever on the Pillman-Austin situation. I suppose in theory we're supposed to watch the syndicated television at the weekend to find out more. Anyway, we're going in hot with Owen and Bulldog against Sid and Shawn Michaels for the tag titles. Oh, and here's Austin on split screen. He's apologising for nothing. Michaels, thankfully, carries much of the match. Michaels, of course, ends up grazing Sid with a sweet chin music. The whole thing looks a bit shit. Owen pulls Michaels out the ring and Bulldog pins Sid to retain the titles. Mankind wins a squash over Freddie Joe Floyd. Undertaker's gong hits and a cage descends from the ceiling with a surprisingly decent looking Paul Bearer body hanging upside down inside. We get a nice video package with Rocky Maivia talking about his heritage. We even see him induct his dad into the Cauliflower Alley Club. He wants to get by on his style, not on his heritage. We get a promo from Sid, who says that Shawn Michaels' incidents with him recently have been no accident. Shawn, out of the commercial, cuts a pissed off promo in response. We get a shockingly long match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bob Holly. Jim Ross makes the most of the time by ragging on Vince for not calling the names of moves. Austin ends the show outside of Brett's locker room, but he says that if you want to see the match, you're going to have to pay for it. Someone is stealing my lines because this is the match of the decade. And we come back in for our review of Survivor Series. Colin, can you kick us off with the results?
In a traditional Survivor Series match, Furnace, LaFon and the Godwins defeated Owen, Hart, British Bulldog and the New Rockers, with Furnace and LaFon being your survivors. The Undertaker defeated Mankind. Then the team of Mark Marrow, Rocky Maivia, Jake Roberts and the Stalker, they defeated Crush, Jerry Lawler, Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust, with Rocky Maivia being the sole survivor. Bret the Hitman Hart defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin to determine the number one contender to the Wwf Championship. Then we had Farouk, Vader, Razor Ramon and Diesel taking on Flash Funk, Jimmy Snuka, Savio Vega and Yokozuna. All ended in a double disqualification. In the main event, Psycho Sid defeated Shawn Michaels to become the WWF champion.
Jeff, what do you think of this show?
I really enjoyed 4 of the matches. I thought the Bret Austin match was probably the best WWF match of the year and one of the best North American matches of the year. I enjoyed the opening tag match. I thought Taker and Mankind worked really well together. And, the other 2 Survivor matches, I thought Rocky Maivia came off strong. I thought Helmsley and Goldust and Lawler's team, those were the 3 names that actually, Helmsley, Lawler, and Goldust, because wasn't particularly impressed with Crush. I liked that match. The big schmoz DQ match, blah, and I wasn't really a fan of the main event, but altogether I thought it was a pretty fun match to watch. It was easy viewing.
Colin?
The show was okay. It was alright. Like I said, I enjoyed the first match. I liked Undertaker Mankind. Bret and Stone Cold was a fantastic match in my eyes. The DQ for the 4-on-4 with Farouk and Vader. I mean, I don't understand why it ended up in a double DQ. It was Diesel that came in and smashed Snooker on the back of a chair first. And
it ended in a no contest, wasn't it? Because Diesel hit Snooker with the chair and he got disqualified, and the whole thing just broke down. The ref threw the match out.
I mean, that happened, and then Savio Vega come running back out with a chair, and everybody was just swinging, and the referee just threw the whole thing out.
I wouldn't read that much into it.
Yeah, but I wasn't a fan of the ending, but then it was funny seeing Snooker at his age get smashed across the back with a steel chair. I mean, Diesel properly smashed him across the back with a chair as well. It wasn't he didn't pull any punches. Psycho Sid and Shawn Michaels was what it was. Sid, I think Sid was getting the better responses than Shawn Michaels.
Unquestionably, yeah.
And then, but the ending with hitting Jose Lothario with the camera, it was very weak in my eyes.
This was a good show, not without its faults, as we've said. But I kind of think the negatives on this show were short enough and forgettable enough where you get to the end and there's enough good where you're like, this was a good show. Like, I wouldn't read too much into the 8-man tag that kind of, it felt like they were rushed for time, but equally, like the way the match came across, like it felt like they were about 15 minutes short. So I don't necessarily know whether it was just time cues that caused the change or whether they just went, we were going to have something break down anyway. And as it was, we just were a bit short on time, so we sped it up a bit. But there's 3 quite memorable matches on this card. And you can't say that about very many WWF pay-per-views this year. Anyway, we start with the first of 3 Survivor Series tag matches of the evening. It's Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, Leif Cassidy and Marty Jannetty with Clarence Mason versus Doug Furness, Phil LaFawn, known as Dan Crawford in ECW, Henry O. Godwin and Phineas I. Godwin with Hillbilly Jim. We start with Jannetty and LaFawn. LaFawn flips out of a monkey flip and levels Jannetty with a big clothesline. Phineas spits up in the air, catches it and then rubs it in his hair. That's probably the best thing he'll do all match. Still, he's working with Leif Cassidy, who hits him with a nice body slam. Owen gets in the ring and beats on Phineas. He points to the ref in the direction of the onrushing Henry. That's a distraction so the entire team can attack Phineas, which is quite good. I'm not sure Phineas as the babyface in peril is at all the strongest idea here. I think a small NWO chant breaks out at this point. Vince simply says, Marty Jannetty is trying to calm the crowd down. Imagine having Doug Furness and Phil LaFawn on your team and spending the opening half working with the Godwins. Anyway, Henry hits a slop drop on Jannetty and Jannetty is eliminated. That's Sting's finisher now, Henry. Owen jumps in with a spin wheel kick and Henry Godwin is eliminated. Bulldog hits a running power slam and Phineas I. Godwin is eliminated. This match should pick up now, given that Bulldog is the worst worker left in it. We get a crossover and Bulldog actually ducked under a drop kick, which I've never seen before. Cassidy hits a throw onto Furness, who emphatically kicks out. We get another crossover. Furness jumps over the laying Bulldog and runs into a drop kick from the top from Owen. That just about worked. The heels are using the numbers advantage, as they should. Furness is in peril. Ross, quite rightly, asks why the second referee on the outside can't see all the heel antics. Bulldog hits a lovely stalling suplex and does a little flip to celebrate. LaFawn finally tags in, gets Cassidy on top, hits a belly-to-back flipping suplex of sorts, and Cassidy is eliminated. We're down to Furness and LaFawn against the tag champs. Owen hits a belly-to-belly for a 2, then a second rope elbow. Bulldog hits a low punch. LaFon crucifixes Bulldog, rolls him through into a pin, and Bulldog is eliminated. Bulldog responds by shoulder tackling LaFon's knee, or the back of it. It's Owen versus LaFon and Furnace now. Owen locks in a sharpshooter on LaFon, but Owen releases it to stop an attack from the on-rushing Furnace. LaFon hits a reverse kick and tries to get a hot tag, which he makes. Furnace hits a lovely drop kick and then an even more impressive belly-to-belly suplex, and then a lovely release German suplex for the clean win. A big pop for that. Jeff, what do you think of this match?
I thought it was a really, really good kickoff match. Hard-hitting stuff, technically proficient, really exciting. Really great exchanges. Leaf Cassidy, when he was in there with LaFon, was fun. My one critique of this matchup, there were a couple, but the first one was, I understand Vince wants to get away from the comic book cartoon characters, but there's no way Furnace and LaFon are ever going to get over with just being two really good, painfully bland, Malenkos, for lack of a better word. I was kind of gobsmacked with they're bringing these guys in and they're giving them a really good, push and presentation against the tag champs, and they're just, they reminded me of Strike Force or, the Young Stallions, from the 80s, just two really bland babyface guys. Godwin served their purpose. JR really loves his big tough guys. I liked when the spit into the hair deal, that was kind of cool. Owen Hart is sneaky good. He is very, that's one of my notes is it's sneaky good how good Owen Hart is. It's sneaky. I felt the commentary dropped the ball when Furnace and Bulldog kind of went face-to-face, because Furnace is a former powerlifting champ and Bulldog has always been touted as one of the strongest wrestlers. Take a shot every time JR fawns over someone's collegiate football career, and if you did that tonight, even with just Doug Furnace alone, you'd be hammered. Owen had a really great drop.
With Rocky Maivia, you'd be dead, but yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. It's one of these things where Jim Ross, and I took issue with his comment. I think he's the best commentator in the business, but tonight I felt like he was really hit or miss. He was kind of semi-heelish here, and when he was critical of the referee outside or certain things he was doing, it didn't enhance the match, and it seemed really aggressive and obnoxious and really felt out of place. The crowd kind of lacked heat because they didn't know who Furnace and LaFon really were until LaFon pinned Davey, and then the finish was great. They've got a really cool move set, but I just hate their presentation and packaging. But overall, it was a really fun match. And everybody, Jannetty also got hurt, or it looked like he got hurt in the match early on, because it was he was selling this limp, and it was just, it seemed pretty,
I think he might have been hurt going in. I might have got one. I read about
but bone chip or something, or overall the match was really good though. It's a great way to kick off a pay-per-view.
Colin.
It was good for a kickoff show. They're obviously investing time into Furnace and LaFon, making them credible challengers to Owen and the Bulldog. But I agree in a sense that the way they're being presented is not going to do them any favours with a WWF crowd. They didn't really know who there was coming into this match, and their first real big impression on a pay-per-view of the two guys, they won, and they were both the survivors, but they are literally just, to the WWF fans, they're just going to come across as two good wrestlers. That's it. There's nothing else they're going to remember about them. They're good wrestlers with a good moveset, but there's nothing that's going to be memorable to a WWF crowd that at the moment is still very much gimmick orientated.
I think I can't disagree with the point, but I think at this stage, given that this is effectively their debut, I don't know, they might have appeared on some syndicated stuff prior. I think technically at this point, we could at least give them the out that, well, they deserve the chance to give them that kind of character. I think the bigger question off the back of that is, will they? And we'll find out. And, they may well not. But to a small extent, I can excuse them just bringing them in and just putting them in this match. I don't think that's the end of the world. They were more over at the end of the match than they were at the start. And if you want to, you can build a character around these guys over the course of X weeks and months. Whether they will or not is another story, and we'll find that out. I thought this match was as near to perfectly booked a match as you will ever see. And to an extent, Survivor Series tag matches do give you the opportunity of booking matches in different ways, because you can book eliminations and numbers games, etc., etc. But the minute you decided that you were going to have a match with these 8 guys, you know, you get the Godwins in there, you get their stuff in, and then you eliminate them. And they eliminated Janae. And then you get down to 5. I was watching at that point and I thought, I don't think they'll do this, but the way to get the new guys over, or to start getting them over, is to have them win this 2-0 at the end of this match from a 3-2 losing position. And that's exactly what they did. They did it in the right order. LaFon and Furnace looked good. From a booking standpoint, it was about as perfect a book match you will ever see. I cannot disagree on the wider point, though, that at the moment those characters are a bit flat. I think we owe them the time to do that should they want to. We'll see about that. But as the match goes, yeah, very good. I thought they all did a very good job, and it feels like we've got a credible match off the back of this now between Owen and the Bulldog and Furnace and LaFon. So in that sense, job done. I think, long story short. We get a backstage promo in the dark. It's really dark, with Paul Bearer and Mankind and Kevin Kelly. Bearer says he's not going in the cage. Don't think that one's going to work, Paul. Next up, it's Mankind with Paul Bearer versus The Undertaker in a match where Paul Bearer will be suspended in a kind of sort of shark cage high above the ring. Undertaker descends from the ceiling wearing a bat-like cape. That sped up his entrance, that's for sure. Colin, what do you think of The Undertaker's new look? More leathery, slightly different change of hair, new entrance, wings?
I mean, he's had the same look for, it's quite a while now. Was it 4 or 5 years?
Feels like since he debuted. I don't know. Was it something different when he started?
91. No, it was the grey tie thing with grey gloves, and then I think all he did was change up the colour a little bit, didn't he?
The purple.
Yeah, the purple. The Undertaker gimmick, I like it. I've always liked it, but it's the sort of thing that is going to get old, and he needs to freshen it up a little bit. And I think, I mean, it wasn't just leather. It was like, I think it was shiny leather. That's what I kept thinking. I was thinking, wow, that's quite shiny for the Undertaker. And then, the hairstyle. He's just trying to freshen up his look. He's got to try and keep himself relevant and up to date, I suppose, as he can with this gimmick.
Jeff, we're not here for fashion advice, but a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I thought it was an awesome superstar entrance for Taker, and with the leather, I thought he looked a lot more cooler, a lot more modern and contemporary. It kind of reminded me of the Metallica remakes after they cut their hair and started wearing a lot more biker outlaw type look. From their most recent albums. I thought it was pretty cool. It kind of goes in the right direction of him being a little more metal. And it makes him, it makes him a little more contemporary, especially if you're going with guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who is basically just this, swearing, killer, as you said earlier. And now you have a dead man. You kind of want to refresh that. So if you make him look a little more metal, a little more edgier himself, it gives the character more longevity, and I thought it was a cool entrance.
They did run the risk of making him look a bit like a Batman type person, though, didn't they?
I think that was the goal.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd necessarily be the worst thing in the world, but I think more crucially, we'll come to the match. We'll come to it when we get to the match. I think it also kind of coincided with a slight change of style, which I guess it was more just a little facelift for a character that's been around a while. The logic from a storyline perspective is that Mankind has brought this out of him, brought this kind of change in direction. So that makes sense too. Yeah, I think it kind of works. I don't know that I'd use the entrance every time, say it for big events, but it was certainly different. As I say, it meant he got there a bit quicker. So there's always that. Undertaker attempts to reach through the cage while he's still at ring level. That's Bearer, obviously. Mankind attacks him and they lift up the cage. Undertaker hits a drop toe hold, yes, really, then an armbar. Taker is working the hand that Mankind usually uses for the mandible claw. We end up in the crowd. Mankind charges at Undertaker, who flips him over the guardrail back into the ringside area. Mankind hits his running somersault dive off of the apron. He then throws Undertaker into the turnbuckle, bounces off, and then just runs Mankind over. Undertaker then just starts biting Mankind's right hand. Mankind hits what I can only describe as a snap pile driver. That looked really good or really bad, depending on which way you want to look at it. Taker block to Mandible Claw. Mankind runs into a big boot, and then Taker sets for a tombstone, but Mankind slides out. Mankind goes for the claw, but Undertaker manages to hurl him through the middle ropes. Undertaker hits his top rope walking punch. Mankind responds with a neck breaker. Ross says maybe the more pain Mankind is in, the more effective he is. Mankind comes off the top, lands on his feet, but Undertaker sets for a chokeslam. Mankind puts in the Mandible Claw, and this time it looks decent. Undertaker fades. He then shows sign of life at the 3 count. He gets to his feet and hits a chokeslam. And does a flip dive off the apron, but Undertaker ducks under it. Mankind goes for a suplex, but Undertaker slides out into a belly to back. Bearer's presence so far has added nothing to the match. Mankind pulls a shank from his trunks and strikes the Undertaker in the head. Quite how the referee didn't see that twice, I'm not exactly sure. Mankind ends up on top of Undertaker in the corner. Undertaker picks him up on his shoulders, hits a tombstone piledriver, and wins the match. The cage descends. Undertaker goes to attack Bearer, but outruns the Executioner. It's Terry Gordy. Taker sort of fights him off, but by that stage, Mankind has got Bearer out of harm's way. Colin.
I think it's as good as they could have got for Undertaker and Mankind. Obviously the payoff was for Undertaker to beat Mankind and get his hands on that dastardly pallbearer. And he didn't get to do it because of the Executioner coming out and making the save. So it gives the feud more legs to carry on for a little bit longer. They obviously feel that they can get more out of it. It did what it needed to do to keep you interested. You want Undertaker to get his hands on Bearer. We're just going to have to wait a little bit longer.
Jeff.
I dug the match between these two. I think they have really great chemistry. I've liked all their matches together. The match conceit kind of, I liked parts of it. I didn't like it. I kind of think when you book a singles match with the manager above the cage, I know they did that with Cornette back in the 80s. If you do that gimmick after you've done 2 other gimmick matches, it kind of seems like the reverse. Taker's feuds always seem to now go along the lines of he gets screwed over, they do a gimmick match where he gets screwed over, and then he finally gets his payoff match in a casket match, and this kind of felt like the same kind of formula for the Undertaker's feuds that have been the last couple of years. I like the psychology of Taker working the mandible claw, fingers in hand, although, as you mentioned earlier with the drop toe hold, it's they start off by saying you're not going to see any, classical wrestling here, and all of a sudden you see some chain wrestling after you're booking this gimmick-heavy grudge match feud. So it kind of felt out of place. Mankind's awesome. His movements, his sellings, his reactions, they're just all incredible. My one note going forward, looking towards the next Wrestlemania, is I just want to hope that they can rehab Vader enough after his, SummerSlam debacle and how mismanaged he's been so far. If he could work Taker, because I think they could have magic stuff together as just 2 big men just beating the hell out of each other. Very, stiff, snug style, the stuff that got Vader over in the first place in WCW. One thing I noted was that the camera crew seemed to miss a couple of Mankind's crazy bumps on first take, which seems like a waste of those crazy bumps. JR's commentary was MVP quality here. I thought that he did a really great story to get over how violent and dangerous both these guys were, which was totally the opposite to my criticism from the first match. And, it was a good finish, kind of lame to tease a payoff on getting your hands on Paul Bearer and then bringing out Gordy. I don't like that he's the Executioner since he's Terry Gordy. I don't know why they would do that since he has equity in his name, but overall it was pretty fun.
Jeff, what does Paul Bearer being suspended above the ring in a cage add to this match?
Well, the whole threat is that he can't interfere.
But it's not well.
The old sentiment is in the territories when Cornette would do it, would be Cornette's hung above the cage with they'd say a shark enforced, steel cage or some garbage like that. They'd hang him up there and they'd say, well, he's cost so-and-so the match so many times, he's interfered on their behalf so many times, now we're going to make sure he's out of the equation. Now, invariably what that usually means that Cornette would have something in his shoe that he would throw down to the heel team that he was, to the Midnights. So here the idea would be that Paul Bearer would have had to cost Taker a bunch, and then he can't interfere, which is kind of moot when, I don't know. They didn't really book it correctly, but I can't really complain about it because I enjoyed the match.
I mean, but why didn't they have Bearer? Did Bearer drop the shank for Mankind?
Don't think so.
Nope, don't think so.
Why wouldn't you book that?
I don't know. I mean, my question for you, Jeff, wasn't really about the idea behind this behind this kind of stipulation. There's something to that, but in the situation you describe, you're right. But it didn't work here. Like, Bearer being above the ring added almost nothing to the match. Like,
Bearer's not really he's not really your typical always getting involved, very physical kind of manager either. So it's not like...
No, and it's not... Well, I don't want to say he's not emotive, but like we had Jerry Lawler above the ring in a shark cage, I think at the beginning of this year. And Lawler, credit too, I think managed to give himself a nosebleed while he was up there. And they also had a live mic hooked up to him as well, so that he could kind of commentate while he was shit scared above the ring. That kind of made sense. This was just all a bit flat. And I kind of thought, well... Like, Bearer's not the biggest, it's not like Mankind's winning a load of matches because Bearer stands on the apron and distracts the referee. I'm not saying he's not involved, but it just didn't really work. Like, it would have made as much sense if they'd just locked Bearer in a cage at ringside and just said, you can watch this, and then if Undertaker wins, you come out and he can beat you up. I suppose that's not a lot different. I thought this match was fine, but I'm kind of in agreement with Jeff. Like, when you've had a Boiler Room Brawl, when you've had a Buried Alive match, this feels like a weird third chapter. Just like an ordinary singles match, half an hour into a show. Yeah, but it was a good match. I mean, these two work well together. They're both good enough. I almost wouldn't have done this match on this show. I don't necessarily know that the show needed a singles match of this caliber. Like, you almost could have done like Team Undertaker versus Team Mankind or something like that. Something a little bit different. But the booking at the end with the execution running, I don't know that I love Undertaker and execution. I presume we'll get that next month. I don't know that I love that match, but it made sense. Like, Undertaker gets Bearer, but Bearer gets away off the distraction. It was fine. It just, given good and their match quality has generally been pretty good, this was not quite up to the level that I think we've expected before. But then again, second on a major pay-per-view, I guess it doesn't have to be to an extent. Here comes Sonny. She thinks she's a babyface now. Hunter Hearst Helmsley is backstage with his team, Goldust, Lawler and Crush. They're saying Mark Henry's injured. The team is saying it's going to be 3-on-4, but I'll be pretty shocked if they don't replace him. Hendricks gets comments out of each of them, but this is a nothing interview. And we move on next to Crush, Jerry Lawler, Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust with Marlena versus Wildman Mark Marrow, The Stalker, Rocky Maivia and their surprised guest, Jake the Snake Roberts with Sable. Sonny points out Hunter has no lady with him. Ross says he's more than perfect too. Marrow name checks New York for a cheap pop. He indeed says they're going to have a new member, and it's Jake Roberts. We start with Marrow versus King. Fans drum up a Burger King chant. Marrow then tags out, as does King, so it's Stalker versus Hunter. No, it's not. It's Marrow versus Goldust, and we get underway. Marrow hits a bag drop and an arm drag. Lots of tags. Marrow gets in, but Hunter scarpers and drags in Crush. King hits Rocky with a shoulder tackle. Rocky kips up. They're all talking Rocky up on commentary. Hunter goes hard at Rocky in the corner. He plays the face in peril well. He was tagged in. He was until he was tagged in Roberts, who went after everyone. Roberts whips up the crowd, shapes for a DDT, but Hunter drives him into the heel corner to stop the advantage. Roberts swings a punch at Lawler but misses. Lawler imitates that Roberts is drunk. Roberts is playing possum, drops Lawler with a DDT, and Lawler is eliminated. Stalker hits a suplex on Goldust for a 2. Goldust hits a pretty ugly curtain call and pins the Stalker. Marrow hits a nice knee lift on Goldust. Goldust flies off the ropes with a clothesline. The match is really flattened out. Marrow comes off the top with a lovely moonsault onto the standing Hunter, and that's enough to eliminate him. That was all possible thanks to Roberts illegally stepping in the ring to distract Hunter. Marrow goes for a slingshot splash to the outside, but Crush moves, and Marrow hits the mat hard. Seems like they eliminated Marrow after that. Crush hits Roberts with a heart punch, and Roberts is eliminated. It's Rocky versus 2 guys, and the crowd start chanting Rocky, Rocky, so he's got that going for him at least. Rocky hits an inside cradle for a 2, but it's actually turned to a handicap match. Rocky hits an ugly-looking double crossbody. Goldust low blows him. Goldust holds up Rocky. Crush goes for the heart punch, but Rocky moves and Goldust eats it. Rocky pins Crush, and it's 1 versus 1. Rocky hits a running shoulder breaker, pins Goldust, and Rocky wins the match. Colin.
I think this match was always being built to make Rocky Maivia look good. They love the fact that they've got a third-generation star. And this was all about, in the end, making him look as good as they possibly could. I had to say, Jake the Snake Roberts, I'm a big fan of his, but boy did he look old and out of shape when he came out. They had him previously wearing it was like a waistcoat gimmick during King of the Ring and stuff, and they should have had it on him tonight. I mean, the way he stormed the ring with this massive albino python waving it above his head and then slid the poor thing into the ring. He looks so out of shape and out of place. He's always going to get, the name recognition, and he managed to work the crowd up a couple of times, but it's quite sad to see him look like that, to be honest. But it was an okay match. Rocky Maivia, they've obviously pinned him as a star, and this is what that match was for.
In that sense, Colin, did it work?
Yeah, I mean, he came out. He was 2-on-1 at one, and towards the end of the match, he got the fortunate heart punch to Goldust, miscommunication. He hit some. I'm assuming the shoulder breaker is his finisher. It's a bit of an odd finisher, but I don't really remember him working over any arms to make that make much sense. But yeah, they tried to make him look strong. He's come out 2-on-1 and managed to get the win. So yeah, it's okay. It's not a bad booking.
Jeff, was it too similar to the opening match in terms of the new babyface act overcoming the numbers game? Would you have played it a little differently second time up?
I think they could have done a better job at working some of these teams to protect certain guys. I think they could have done more for the heels on certain ones. Like, I think if you look at Helmsley and Goldust, I think they're in the same boat as Vader and Farouk, whereas their teammates were kind of lesser than. So I think there was a misrepresentation of kind of the core of these teams, or sorry, not misrepresentation, but a misuse of how you build the teams to kind of complement each other, and guys who can take falls and guys who can't. The Rocky Maivia stuff, I thought he looked pretty good. The ring gear looked a little questionable. It didn't really strike me as cool for a fresh young babyface. He kind of looked like something out of the Flintstones. The teal, just the kind of the aesthetic, all there wasn't there.
Looked like Tatanka's old ring gear.
It was just. It just didn't strike me like, if you look at the Undertaker's new cool leather stuff, and if you look at the edgier stuff that like Austin and Pillman are kind of wearing, and then you see Rocky Maivia come out, it just kind of sinks for me. But they really tout him hard as a blue chipper, and Jim Ross, as I said earlier, really wanted to tout his collegiate background. One thing I noted was it's crazy to see these young talents. Like, they have Marrow, Dustin Rhodes, Helmsley, Mick Foley, Scorpio, Pillman, Austin, all these guys that they've stocked up on with really good talents. They're all from WCW, and it's almost as though like they're using that place as their developmental to get guys that they can use as future, building blocks for their upper mid card to the main event, which is pretty smart. When you look at who they're trading for WWE versus WCW, where you have like Duggan and all those guys, it kind of felt more now than ever that they're trying to really recapture that babyface Randy Savage Liz gimmick with Marrow and Sable in the way they present her. Marrow's moveset's solid, but he just really doesn't have the charisma. It was depressing watching both Barry Windham and Jake Roberts in this match. Jake's obviously more out of shape than Barry, but considering how great in the ring Barry Windham was, that gimmick is DOA. I mean, that's just brutal, and he's just, oh my God. It's crazy when you think those are two of the best wrestlers from the 80s. Roberts from a psychology standpoint, and Windham from an actual worker standpoint. And here they are on the undercard, just completely afterthoughts. Great heel work by Lawler, Hunter, and Goldust. Jake has the crowd pretty much, trained to know the short arm clothesline, setting up the DDT. So it's awesome to see them eat out of his hand. Everything else, Marrow does high spots. Crush is bad. His heart punch isn't over. they booked that blue chip Rocky Maivia really good. I thought he could have used a cool finisher. I'm sure there's something from Japan that Kawada or one of those guys uses that would be a lot better than just a shoulder breaker. Also, at his size, a crossbody just seems ill-advised. My main takeaway from these matches, this one and the one later coming up with Farouk and Vader's team, it felt like they didn't highlight guys on the heel side as much, and maybe that was because the goal was to get over Rocky Maivia and certain guys. But I felt like the heels were undermined on most of these team matches.
Yeah, I mean they came with one goal in mind really, which was to get Rocky Maivia over. They had really two other guys they wanted to protect in Marrow and Helmsley. But Jeff, I thought you were a bit polite on some of your analysis beyond those three guys. I don't think Goldust is anything these days anymore. I don't know how effective he is as a heel, and his work rate has deteriorated a lot in the last couple of years. Part of that is the change of gimmick, but I would argue there are other things going on there as well. Rollins is okay, but he's in that kind of spot. He's a novelty act, and he wasn't the first or the last. Was he the first? Yeah, he wasn't the last novelty act on this show. So that was okay. As for Maivia, it felt a little similar, like the new act that we haven't really done a lot with on TV. I know they've done some stuff with Maivia on Superstars, not that I'm watching that. But it felt a little too similar to the first one. I kind of would have had him in the 2-on-1 situation, get it down to 1-on-1 and then had him kind of screwed, so you could have given him have him eliminate Goldust and have Goldust like screw him right afterwards. So Crush, all right. Maybe you don't want Crush as the last guy in there. There's other ways of telling that story. But give him something a bit different rather than just this win. It felt a little flat. He looked okay though. You could tell that he's still learning the ropes, quote unquote. But yeah, enough going for him in short spurts. But I kind of felt once we got down the stretch on his own, they were kind of right just to get on with it. And it did just about work. And the crowd were chanting Rocky. Not that Rocky's the most difficult thing to chant, but that's something. I mean, it's better than the not chanting Rocky, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. All in all, a decent match. I don't think one was all that memorable. Anyway, we get an interview with Steve Austin. He says that Brett, cliches are cliches and an ass whipping is an ass whipping. Crowd pop for that. Brett then says separately, Madison Square Garden isn't a church, but it is holy ground. He repeats, I'm not greedy for money, I'm greedy for respect. And next up, it's Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, with the winner of the match meeting the WWF champion next month. Austin sticks two middle fingers up at Bret, which gets a gasp. Austin starts wrenching the arm. Bret returns the favour. Ross mentions WrestleMania 10. I watched that on pay-per-view, he says. Lots of arm holes in the opening minutes here. Austin breaks up the monotony with a stun gun. Back to a rest hold mid-ring by Austin. Finally, the match lines up with an exchange of punches as Austin regains control. Ross says Stone Cold wins round 1. That's the second Tyson Holyfield reference he's got in this match. Bret attempts a running Bulldog, but Austin manages to shove him into the turnbuckle. They go to the top, but Bret manages to throw Austin off and drop an elbow from the second rope. We spill to the outside. Bret manages to drive Austin into the guardrail, and the guardrail actually comes apart briefly, so we're in with the frowns as the guardrail falls over. What is this, ECW? Austin catapults Bret onto the announcers table. They brawl onto the announcers' chairs, and Spanish announcers have vacated. One of them was kind of buried in the pile. Austin drops Bret onto the table, then hits a standing elbow onto Bret from the apron. Austin drops an elbow from the second rope for a 2. This does have the feeling of Bret versus Shawn for WrestleMania. Austin can't hit the stunner because he isn't winning, and Bret can't use the sharpshooter because Austin isn't submitting. Or at least that's what I put in my notes at the time. Lots of support for Austin with Let's Go Austin chants. Austin uses the ropes for leverage of an abdominal stretch. The ref breaks him off and Austin shoves him. They have a standing exchange. Bret wins it. Another Holyfield reference from Ross. Bret uses the stun gun on Austin. Bret goes for a cradle, doesn't really pull it off, but Austin kicks out. Bret hits a pile driver and both men are down. Bret covers Austin soon after, but he kicks out. Bret goes to the top. Austin follows him up and crotches him on the top. Austin unloads with some punches and then hits a very nice superplex. Austin goes for a pin, but Brett locks it up and almost pins Austin. Another boxing reference from Ross, this time Ali Frazier. Austin hits a stunner. Brett kicks out. The story they tried to tell was that Austin just didn't quite get the pin in quickly enough. It didn't really work. I guess we'll discuss that at the end. I didn't see Brett kicking out a stunner though, as we kind of said. Brett did manage to roll out of the way a bit, I guess. Austin goes for a Texas Cloverleaf. Brett struggles towards the ropes and then makes it. Austin throws Brett towards the turnbuckle. Brett ends up sliding back first into the ring post. Austin goes for a bow and arrow. Brett escapes and attempts the sharpshooter. He tries to get it in, but Austin gets to the ropes. Brett instead goes for a sleeve hold. Austin again hits a jawbreaker that looks way too much like his stunner. Austin goes for $1 Million Dream submission. Brett kind of climbs up the turnbuckle using his feet, pushes off and rolls through for a pin for the 3. After the match, Brett does a lap of honor. Jeff?
Yeah, that was an incredible match. Bret Hart's my favorite wrestler, and he's really incredible at, making and minting talents, when others really wouldn't have, if given that same spot. Bret had to win his return match, but the way Austin lost, it doesn't hurt him. He wouldn't release his submission hold for the 3 count. He looked dangerous. He looked like a capable threat. He's so vile and legitimate that he really stands out. When you let Austin swear when the rest of your roster doesn't, that again makes him stand out.
Unless Brian Pillman's doing it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But they're the Hollywood Blondes, so I kind of consider them a package deal. But this really this felt like the main event. Ross did a great job. There was some really great chain wrestling to start out. I thought McMahon was dreadful in this match, just with his persona on commentary. Everything's a maneuver. I didn't enjoy that. I think Brett's the best psychologist in the business. The way he worked the arm and the shoulder of Austin, given that his big moves were the stunner and the dream. I think Brett's brilliant, if you haven't noticed yet. Everything, loved Austin working Brett's throat. I mean, just everything. Then it breaks down to a brawl because, their technique isn't working, and then Brett's fed for the comeback, and they're using each other's, he uses Austin's stun gun on him. Thought the finish was clever, lets Brett get his win, gets Austin to save face. I thought this was probably the best match in the U.S. this year.
Colin?
I agree. I think it was I loved the match. Brett is also my favourite wrestler. He has been since I was a kid. Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's so technically good, and Bret Hart with him is just, it's the potential to be, it's got potential to be even better than this, and I think this was really good. The wrestling in ring was great. I think even when they took it to the outside, none of it seemed overdone to me, even though they spilled over the barrier and the barrier came down. They used the announcer's table. It didn't seem overdone. So again, I had Brett's psychology down, working on Austin's arm because, his finisher is the stunner. It worked on so many levels. I liked...
We didn't work that well. Austin did it twice.
Well, no, I mean the match itself worked on so many levels. I
know. I was about Brett breaking the arm, but sorry.
I especially liked that after Brett had his hand raised, the camera focuses on his face, and if you paid attention, you could just see him look at the camera and say, fuck. It's quite obvious to see, but I mean, I thought it was quite awkward as well afterwards when he was going around on his lap of honor, high-fiving all the fans. Vince McMahon standing up and giving him the congratulations. That Jim Ross was almost looking at him as if to say, what are you doing?
I think it's the first time Vince has done that. I seem to remember him doing something similar with Shawn Michaels a few months ago. I may be wrong on that. This is a really, really good match in the sense that it set out to achieve one thing, which was to create... Bret Hart's called Stone Cold Steve Austin the best wrestler in the WWF. I don't, as I kind of said last month, I don't think we've actually seen that yet. And to an extent, once Brett said it, he's kind of got an obligation to prove it. And so Brett set out in part to, not that Austin's a bad worker, but in part to prove a point and to prove that Austin is indeed as good as he is. And if you want to elevate Austin to a potentially main event level guy, you've got to show he can do it with the ring. And this was the first time in the WWF we've got even remotely, even remotely close to that kind of point. That was really good. I also thought this match was great from a standpoint that not a lot actually happened. Like, you'll very rarely see a match where so little, big stuff happens. There wasn't any great moments in this match, and yet Brett and Austin managed to put together a great match. I like that, as much as it was about disrespect, I like that it started as a chain wrestling match, because it makes sense for Austin to try and out wrestle the guy. And then, as you say, when it broke down into more of a brawl because the wrestling wasn't working. That made sense. I did have some qualms with this match, though. As I kind of put in my notes, Austin's not going to hit the stunner here because he's never going to, Brett's never going to kick out of it. That'd be stupid. And then they did it, and it was like, you could tell, or at least I think that didn't come across quite as it should, because it felt like Jim Ross was working really, really hard to try and prove a point about that. As in, oh yeah, Brett rolled out the way, and he sort of did. We've still got Austin doing the thing where he'll hit the jawbreaker out of the submission, and it's like, yeah, that's another stunner, Steve. You need to work on that. It helps that the commentators are on point enough not to call it. I think if this was in WCW and they're a bit less, concentrating on getting guys over, they might call that as a stunner, and then you've got problems. Jeff, my big issue with this match, I kind of felt it lacked a bit of drama.
What's at stake here? Brett's all about respect, and Austin has no respect. Brett's coming back trying to prove himself after losing his title at Mania. Austin's calling him a phony, and he's all about slogans. I think they were selling this as, a battle of gunslingers, and Brett's really big into, westerns and that kind of motif, and Brett really does have that sheriff mentality, the way he kind of carries himself, like Wyatt Earp in Tombstone, where he's the good guy, and he said in a promo that he was here to clean up the WWF. I would strongly disagree with you there, Bob. This was a babyface getting a heel over, not, imagine if Brett had gone for his diving elbow and pulled up and just started screaming at his heel halfway through the match. Like, how would that have gotten Austin over? I think this was a really, really important match to get your heel over. I don't know if you caught that reference to Shawn Michaels, Bob. That was a reference to Shawn Michaels. But I think everything was important because Brett says this guy's the best wrestler and I want to beat him. And he went out there, and whether or not Austin is the best wrestler, Brett put value in Austin and then made his win all the more better. So I thought it had intensity. I thought it had everything you need out of a match, and it proved tonight that Bret Hart is the better overall worker than Shawn Michaels, in my opinion, because while Michaels might be the better athlete, psychology counts for a lot.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the fact that it achieved its purpose. So in a way, it's a weird criticism. I just felt that the last few minutes were a little anticlimactic. I'm guessing we're going for a rematch. Well, we are. Let's be obvious about that. But Jeff, for such a great match, like for quite allegedly a great match, like I don't think it finished like a great match.
Well, it's the part of a series, probably. Or even if it isn't, you want to protect Austin. You don't want to have him tap out in the middle of the ring. And, you're calling back to WrestleMania 8 with the Piper finish. Austin, even though he kind of, did the stunner that got kicked out of, Austin looked really strong in this match. He hung in there with the top guy.
Colin, chip in on that?
Yeah, so I really popped for the finish. Piper and Bret Hart was one of my favourite matches of all time. So when I saw Bret kick off of the turnbuckle and get the pin, I revelled in it just because it made me think back to that. I think the match was solid. I think that they set out, Bret had to win because it was his comeback. We knew that. But they set out to make a star out of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he showed that he can hang wrestling with Bret Hart. And I mean, Bret Hart is it's the cliche saying, the best there is, best was, best. He is the best wrestler in the WWF, and Stone Cold Steve Austin showed that he can hang with him. And I think that speaks volumes as to where they could go with Stone Cold. If he can have a great match like this with Bret Hart, hopefully he can do what Bret Hart does and get the best out of anybody that he wrestles. And it's looking promising.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I don't think this was the best match of the night. So I'll leave it at that. We get a promo from Sid, who then outwalks Lou Albano. Seemed like he's here just to join the Spanish announcers. Two singers or rappers come out. It's PG-13. I think they were on Raw at some point last year. And it's the Nation of Domination. They're here to introduce Farouk, who does a one-handed salute in the ring. Flash Funk then comes out. Flash Funk, obviously Too Cold Scorpio, with two women dancing, and the roster calls them the Funkettes. Next up, another 8-man tag. It's Farouk, Razor Ramon, Diesel, and Vader with Clarence Mason and Jim Cornette. Interesting they're both out, given Cornette and Mason in theory are feuding. Against Savio Vega, Yokozuna, Flash Funk, and a surprise with Superfly Jimmy Snuka. We start off with Funk and Vader. By my count, 4 of these guys wrestled in ECW, for what that's worth. We run the ropes. Vader goes down too early for a bump, and Funk spin kick, which looks a bit weird. Funk then hits a fantastic moonsault from the top to Vader on the outside. We get a better view on replay. That looked great, and a mild ECW chant broke out, I think. Yokozuna gets in the ring illegally and drops Vader with a one-arm slam. Vader hits a spin kick on Farouk. Ramon hits a fallaway slam on Vega. Funk runs into a big clothesline from Diesel. Diesel goes for a two-handed choke slam. The crowd are dead. Snuka tags in, which livens things up. Diesel gets a knee up. Diesel jackknifes Vega, and Vega is eliminated. Snuka hits a Superfly splash and eliminates Ramon. Diesel hits Snuka with a chair, and the whole match disintegrates, and everyone's disqualified, or weird, no contest, whatever. Colin, what do you think of this match?
I didn't really see a point to it, to be honest. Who do you make look strong? You've got fake Razor, fake Diesel that, they're there just to stick two fingers up to Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. You want Farouk to look strong with the Nation. Yokozuna's not really been relevant since he lost the WWF title. Superfly should be retired.
Actually, he should be in jail, actually, if we're being honest.
Well, yeah, he should be in jail. You're absolutely right. But I really didn't enjoy the match at all. The only thing I really popped for was how hard Diesel smashed Snuka over the back with a chair at the end. It was brutal, considering how old and frail Snuka looked.
Yeah, surprised didn't snap him in half. Jeff?
Yeah, the fake Razor and Diesel gimmick, it's death for these guys. I mean, it's not going anywhere, but I actually kind of enjoy it because it is such a double middle fingers to Hall and Nash that you're watching it and it's like, well, this is our property. I mean, you can recast an actor in a movie. Why not do that? I kind of, even if it's just like a little smirk and a chuckle, I kind of laugh at it. With that being said, do I really want to laugh with Vader and Farouk in the same ring, since those are two badass dudes who should be treated and presented very seriously. Vader's been utterly wasted here. I don't know how much you want to fault him and his injury status. I think they fumbled big time with him. I would have liked to see him in a match where maybe he's the guy. It's 1-on-4 with, he's the only heel, and then he just walks through. I mean, they had all those guys on the free for all that were just doing nothing. Vader could have just squashed a bunch of those guys. You reestablish him. I didn't understand what he's doing here. Same with Farouk. I didn't get the need to repackage Scorpio, but here's the cool thing. They always say Vince McMahon likes to repackage talent so he has his own personal investment. So hopefully that can get him a better push because he's a great talent. I thought Cornette was great on color commentary. I thought he's infinitely better than King. Yoko looks unhealthy at this point. His Uranage here was, it was bad. I thought pretty much the finish was stupid. Bringing in Snuka, he got clocked with the chair, which, the guy didn't need any more, injuries to the head as it is. Altogether, this was the weakest match on the card, in my opinion, and it served nobody here.
Yeah, in terms of the show, it served the purpose of being a filler between the two big matches. In terms of the guys involved, there are some guys that deserve a lot better in this, and there are some guys that probably don't deserve the semi-main on a major pay-per-view. I'm with Jeff. I'd have happily seen Vader, Farouk, and Flash just kill the other five. Just in terms of that there are three guys in this match that have some legs going for them at the moment, and there are five guys that don't. I mean, Snooker's a bit of an exception. He's a one-off. But Yokozuna's bad. Vega's horrendous, and the fake Razer and Diesel is just all over the shop. Vader deserves better. Flash Funk, I thought, was probably the only positive on debut. Nice little entrance, got his big moonsault in. And yeah, I suppose I didn't need to see Vader getting pinned by Savio Vega, I guess. So the match going to a kind of 8-way DQ, whatever you want to call it, I guess that works. But yeah, let's move on, shall we? And to the main event, it's Sid versus Shawn Michaels with Jose Thero for the WWF Championship. Sid gets a nice Sid-shaped pyro scaffold. We get a big reaction from Shawn from the women. Shawn gyrates and Sid looks on, focused. Sid starts out with some wild strikes and big cheers from certain sections of the crowd. Shawn slaps Sid. Sid sets to the powerbomb, which whips up the crowd, and Shawn escapes for cover. Shawn gets a boot up on Sid and then shoulder tackles to the back of the knee. Shawn's on top to audible boos from the crowd as we get big Let's Go Sid chants. Shawn channels Jeff Jarrett by going for the figure four. Sid eventually rolls it over. Sid backs into the cameraman on the turnbuckle and shoves it away. Sid hits a couple of kicks into Shawn in the corner. Michael skins the cat. Sid stands up and just clotheslines him over the top for another sizable reaction. Sid on the R-way drops Shawn onto the guardrail. Shawn does a flare flip over the top, then drops Sid over the top to lots of boos. Sid catches Shawn off the top, and we get big cheers from the male section of the crowd. Rallies in a standing exchange of punches and then hits a body slam. He comes off of the top and Sid gets a boot up. Sid locks in an arm submission not too dissimilar to the $1 Million Dream. Shawn fades and almost gets pinned. Shawn goes for the super kick. Sid catches him and hits a one-arm choke slam. The crowd go with it. Sid sets for the powerbomb, waits too long. Shawn hits an inside cradle and almost gets it. I like that as a little throwback to Survivor Series last year. Sid hits a big scoop slam for a 2. Shawn fires off the top with a tackle. Michaels gets up, and with great camera work, Sid just runs into shot and poleaxes Shawn with a clothesline. Speaking of camera work, Sid literally grabs the camera. He then just waits for Lothario as he gets on the apron and then knocks him off with the camera. Shawn smashes Sid with the switching music, but rather than pin him, he goes to check on Lothario, and Shawn calls for help. They intimate that Lothario might be having a heart attack, which seems a little excessive. There's a ref bump, and Sid hits Shawn with a camera. Why has nobody come to check on Lothario? I've got in my notes. Sid then puts Shawn in the ring, hits a powerbomb. 1, 2, 3, and Sid wins the title for a big pop. Jeff?
Yeah, this was kind of a letdown for me. I think majorly, the major issue I had was the babyface dynamic to this match, which was pretty odd. I think the whole babyface male stripper is a weird gimmick. I think Shawn Michaels is an incredible wrestler and an incredible heel. But I think he wrestles like a heel a lot of the time. But I don't really connect with him as a babyface. Sid is not a good wrestler, and here's this big psycho guy selling all this stuff to Michaels, who's also a babyface, so, he can't really, short-bridge Sid and try to get the shortcut like a Flair would. One thing to note, and I'm pretty hard on Shawn Michaels a lot of the time, deservedly so, I should mention. But if you notice his interactions with Jose Lothario, he really no-sells his own manager. The reason the Rocky-Mickey dynamic in those Rocky movies worked was because they actually had a rapport and a chemistry and eye contact. And when Michaels takes a powder early in the match, he doesn't even look at his manager. He doesn't consult him. And it really kind of undermines the finish to the match that all of a sudden Michaels is going to give up his childhood dream to go save his manager because that's his main concern, when he doesn't even give the guy the time of day, which again I think makes him just such an incredible heel. But he's not working he's not presented as a heel, and that feels wasted. The crowd turning on him isn't surprising considering A, it's New York. B, you're going against a guy who's, a comic book character in Sid. I mean, he's a psycho, and, Sid Vicious, all these crazy, monikers. The psychology was just rough. The match felt a little too long. Crowd got hot for Sid in the high spots he does. That's, to the credit to Shawn Michaels to taking a lot of those bumps. I really didn't like the finish. Shawn Michaels isn't the biggest guy in the world. I don't think you need all the excuses of his mentor being killed, the ref bump, hit with the camera, and all that to, get Sid over. Also, I thought all this would have worked a hell of a lot better if Vader was in the Sid role, because Vader is infinitely better than Sid.
Would it have looked worse if Vader had been getting cheered in New York?
I don't think Vader would have been cheered, though. I think Vader would have been a better heel. I think the fact is that Sid is a babyface, or at least closer to, and Michaels. If you're going babyface versus babyface, you're going to have that. If you bring out Cornette and Vader, I guarantee you they're not going to be cheering Vader.
Well, I thought the story of this match, and it was one of the things that made it so interesting, was that Shawn didn't necessarily get a bad reaction coming out, in part because there were just a lot of women cheering for him. But, Jeff, I thought the story of the match was how the crowd turned on him during it. And I don't necessarily think that may have been any different had it have been Vader. Now, I think Cornette would have worked hard to fight that, but I don't know that New York crowd necessarily would have rallied against Vader in this situation. I know it's hardly the point, but what do you think about that?
I think Michaels doesn't do enough babyface type selling to get. I put the blame on. I mean, I get the New York crowd, and I get the fact that they liked the challenger and the prospect of seeing a title change. But I think Michaels doesn't work that Ricky Morton, Ricky Steamboat babyface style to really sell. He's the underdog, and as much as Jim Ross wants to call him a pit bulldog and how he doesn't know how tough he is or he's too tough, at some point he just comes across as invincible. Or maybe his selling I don't think he sells enough is the end of the day. And I think that's where you get your babyface sympathy. I don't think he gets enough. He was working at babyface, so you're undermining his sympathy in that regard. It all just didn't work from a psychological standpoint. Bret Hart's better.
But well slipped in on the end.
What? I mean, it was a 16-minute Iron Man match at WrestleMania, and the champion retained. So this whole run has been asterisk-slated.
Jeff's not bitter 8-9 months on.
Did Bret Hart lose in the 60-minute time frame?
No, he did not.
No, he didn't. So that is a draw, and this is just an interim championship while Bret went off to Hollywood and did The Simpsons. What's Shawn Michaels done? Acted like a stripper. Case closed.
Playgirl.
Playgirl. The Simpsons versus Playgirl, and that's your role model, Bob Bamber? No.
I was going to say we're talking to the world's biggest. We're talking to the world's biggest Bret Hart fan and the world's biggest Simpson fan. We're in tough territory here. I think
you're dealing with Canada's greatest living hero. Okay, and
I thought you were about you for a second. Then.
Bob, that's who I was talking about. No, I think we have a disconnect here. I think Shawn Michaels for the last several months has been a paper champion, and that's what's bit him in the ass. So there you go.
I think it's quite obvious that the fans slowly but surely got sick of watching Shawn Michaels, and it all comes to a head in this match. I mean, they tried to book Sid as the heel. I mean, he hit the 60-year-old man with a camera. He hit the champion in the back with a camera, and the fans cheered him like he was the face. I mean, he is a face, but they're trying to make Shawn Michaels the one they cheer for, and it just didn't work. They're sick of the whole Shawn Michaels story.
What do you think of this match, Colin?
I mean, it's difficult to book a face v face anyway. But when one of the guys you're relying on to try and help you is Sid, I mean, he throws some punches and some kicks, and he can do a power bomb and maybe clothesline you, choke slam you. But there's not really much else to his game. Shawn Michaels can bump better than anybody. He's a fantastic worker. But I say the fans were already turning on him. See, there's so much of this match that could have been good. It just didn't really work. Sid needed to be the heel going into this, I think, to get anything really out of it. But then the fans were already starting to cheer him more than they were Shawn Michaels. I don't know. I really don't.
Well, put me in the minority, but I thought we were about 3 or 4 minutes away from a fantastic match. I think Shawn deserves all the credit in the world for getting a bizarrely excellent match out of Sid by Sid's standards. And all the thought of Shawn getting booed, I thought that added to the match. I thought that the story of Shawn coming out there and getting this quite big babyface reaction and then the male audience just slowly turning on him really kind of enhanced the story. And by Sid's standards, this was an absurdly good match. 95% of that is Shawn, but we'll give Sid some credit where he deserves it. Some credit.
He nearly screwed up the finish. Did you notice?
In which bit?
Do you know how he gets hit? He hit Shawn in the back with the camera.
Yeah.
He very nearly tried to do that the first time round. The referee told him to put the camera down.
Well, how would that have screwed up the finish?
Well, I mean, is that there was obviously something that was supposed to happen, and he was supposed to hit him with the camera a little bit later, and he was told that he had to be told by the referee to do it later. Oh,
I see. No, I didn't notice that. Okay. Yeah. But I thought the whole finish was really contrived. Like, the whole finish really was a big letdown on the match. Like, the way the crowd were going, I would have just had Sid kill Shawn. Like, that would have been it. Just do it cleanly. Right? Shawn Michaels does not need an excuse to be off television for 6 weeks. I know it's rough. We're going to talk about them trying to set up the Alamodome in a bit. I know that would have been a bit tricky. But I don't necessarily think it would have been the end of the world. Sid have just won. Now, admittedly, the Alamodome thing, I suppose, actually just default that argument. But I was, the whole thing of why is Thero trying to get involved in the match? I don't know. Like, it's the ECW thing with Shane Douglas and Pitbull 1. Like, I can only have so much sympathy for the babyface when they openly get themselves involved in a match. Kind of what Sid said on Raw. You stood on the apron, you got into the game, then you were part of it. Now, right, Sid's got a camera. But yeah, I agree that, that the finish was designed to mitigate Sid's babyface reaction so that when he faced Bret Hart next month, he wouldn't get cheered. I suspect they're going to have some problems with that anyway. Although reports are that on some house shows since Sid faced Steve Austin, and Austin of all people was getting cheered. That's interesting. That's one for another time. I thought the match was really very good. As I said, unlike Bret and Austin, I thought this one had a lot more drama. There was a lot more intrigue. And I just felt a bit let down by the end. We're going to discuss Sid's kind of prospects going forward in a bit. But I thought this match just about worked. Could have been great. Could have been really, really good had they not have just overdone the finish. And then, Colin, the thing with the whole fake heart attack, I just thought it was bizarre. Like, they didn't, alright, we know where they're going, but they didn't need to, in the heat of the moment, tell a story that Thero was having a heart attack for the angle to work. Thero could have just been down selling. The angle would have been just as effective. Sid hits Thero with a camera. Thero drops to the outside. Spark out because he's a 60-year-old man who's been hit by a big, lump of whatever. Right, a big camera. The story's already there. He doesn't need to be having a heart attack. And I kind of thought it took away from the moment, particularly when there was about 3 minutes between that happening and nobody came out to help him.
That's what I was to say. Nobody came out to check on the 60-year-old man that just got hit with a camera. And then after the match, when Shawn Michaels went back outside to him and he did have paramedics around him, Michaels pulled some of the paramedics off him. If he's having a heart attack, why is he pulling a paramedic off him?
Yeah.
That makes no sense either.
What are many things, Jeff? What are many things in this part of the story that just didn't make any sense?
Well, I'll tell you why Shawn Michaels pulled off the paramedic. It's because he's selfish and he wanted the camera for himself. Okay? Here's the crazy thing. They have a polar bear named Sid Vicious, and the polar bear has to use a chainsaw in the form of this camera to crush a 220-pound-year-old stripper. Okay? No, I think I mean, Bob, I can appreciate different strokes for different folks, and I'll always give Shawn Michaels credit for being an excellent in-ring performer. However, this finish was just to save his face. The plot to this is line by line the script to Rocky III, except Burgess Meredith's Mickey actually dies, which, who knows, they might do that with Jose Thero because Shawn's going to have his comeback. You got to sell out the Alamo Dome. It's going to be the babyface chasing the heel, whoever it would have been. If it would have been Vader, that would have worked better. If it doesn't make sense, it's all I saw this as the Shawn Michaels vanity saving face show, at which point, I wasn't surprised by the finish because it's Shawn Michaels.
I think we get the underlying point of what Jeff's saying. Colin, overall thoughts on this show and a score rating out of 10.
For a Survivor Series, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of elimination tag matches. I don't think they really work terribly well. But I mean, for a Survivor Series show, I think it was decent enough. I mean, you had the terrible 4-on-4 before the main event. The rest of it was pretty solid. There were obviously some errors made, but it was enjoyable enough. I think I'd give it 7.
Jeff?
Yeah, I thought the Bret Austin match was the best, certainly WWF match of the year, probably one of the best matches I have seen this year. I thought the opening tag elimination match was really great. I thought the Rocky Maivia presentation was very well done. Taker and Mankind was very well done, even though it was kind of goofy. The Shawn Michaels performance was good. As an athlete, he's good. You can edit out all of my Shawn Michaels, just diatribe if you want. I mean, he is an incredible worker, and he did very good with Sid, who I think, although the one thing I'll give Sid credit for is he did the kip-up in this match, which, I mean, I think this was night of 100 kip-ups. I think Shawn, Sid, Bret, and Davey all did something of the sort. Taken all together.
Rocky did one as well?
Yes, there you go. I made note of that. I was like, wow, is there like one agent not talking to the other? Because they're all kind of doing the same thing. And that's Shawn Michaels' spot. So somebody got yelled at backstage. But that's a story for another day. Altogether, I mean, I'd say, like 7.5. I think the Bret Austin match was great. And, hey, the title's off Shawn Michaels. So that's, that's an 8.
Yeah, 7.5. I thought this was a good show. It went by pretty quickly. The one good thing about the Survivor Series format is that generally, the matches are quite decent just because of the whole elimination thing. You can tell some interesting story with the numbers games and all of that. We certainly saw that in the opener, and to a smaller extent, we saw that in the second match. The 3 singles matches were Bret and Austin is a very good match. I think some people will enjoy it more than I did just because it's that style of match. But for what I didn't enjoy of that match, I enjoyed probably doubly so in the main event in terms of the difference levels in terms of it. I just thought the main event had a lot going for it. There's some faults here. I think there was some, enough things going on down the card. It's not a perfect show, but it's pretty good, with a match that a lot of people are going to call exceptional, I call very good, and also a very, very interesting main event with some interesting connotations and some interesting things going forward that we're going to discuss the other side of this.
We are back with more WWF Raw. We're live, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from San Antonio, Texas, from the home of Jose Thero. They're sitting next to Shawn Michaels. Firstly, Jose, thank you very much for the privilege and honor of visiting you in your home.
Anytime, you're always welcome over here.
Thank you. The first question would be an obvious one in terms of, can you give us some status as to what your condition is, your health?
Yes, sir, I sure will, before I do that, Vince, I like to say one thing. I want to apologize to everybody, and especially to Shawn Michaels, because I really feel guilty because of me. He lost the WWF Championship match. So I really, apologize to him.
You said that at the recent press conference, but more important than that, and I'm sure more important, Shawn would agree, your condition, your heart, what's the status?
Well, the status is I checked with the doctor, and the doctor told me they're going to do a balloon pass to my heart because my heart was very damaged and they're taking the Survival Series, and I just going to hold on for a while because I just want to be sure, that I'm going to do the right thing before anything else.
Well, certainly, Shawn, Jose has been your hero for many years, and I would suggest that you would rather see him get better sooner rather than be in your corner for any attempt at a rematch. Notwithstanding that, recently at the Royal Rumble press conference last Wednesday in San Antonio, Texas, it was announced that you were going to have an opportunity to, or at least one opportunity, be the World Wrestling Federation champion once again, to face the champion, whether it's Bret Hart or Psycho Sid after December. And isn't it true that as we have the opportunity to see you live, your dreams have absolutely been shattered, have they not? That boyhood dream has been shattered, and we wonder whether or not you can put the pieces back together again. Will we see that passionate Shawn Michaels ever again?
Well, I think that a lot of people have been addressing the fact that there was an old Shawn Michaels as opposed to who I am now. All of a sudden, I'm over the hill, and people are referring to the old Shawn Michaels. Well, I don't know what it was that everybody liked or disliked. One thing I know is that somewhere down the line, somewhere in the last 8 months, I lost my edge, and that's my fault. It is not his fault. I will not let him take blame for anything, nor will I make an excuse for what happened in Survivor Series. What's done is done. I can be the WWF champion again. This is something that cannot ever, ever be replaced.
We start November the 18th and we're live in New Haven. Steve Austin walks out and Mankind starts a fight with him immediately prior to their match. Officials attempt badly to separate them. Physicality in this match seems a bit weird given that both these guys lost the previous night. Still, it's a wild brawl. Mankind goes to the mandible claw. Austin just belts him in the bollocks. Eventually the Executioner runs out, forcing a DQ. Undertaker comes out for the save, but after he does, Austin throws him over the top. That livens up Taker and Austin scarpers. Ahmed Johnson appears high in the stands. He ends up taking a seat with the fans a long way from ringside. Sonny comes out and introduces the leader of the Nation of Domination, Farouk, who's carrying a bit of 2x4. He faces Savio Vega. The whole thing is dreadful. That includes the match, Sonny and King on commentary. Oh, and apparently Jim Ross is a babyface now. Savio follows Farouk up to the top rope, then they both tumble off the top to the outside. That looks pretty bad. PG-13, Farouk's rappers hit Savio with a 2x4 on the outside and Farouk pins him for the 3. Johnson marches down to ringside, grabs the 2x4 and runs everyone off. He then manages to get the crowd chanting, "You're going down." Well, his defence, it worked. Vince gives us an update on Jose Thero. Finally, we're only about half an hour into the show. He says he's resting at home. We get a match between Leif Cassidy and Bob Holly against Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon. Get a split screen with Owen, Bulldog and Clarence Mason. Owen says they're fighting champions. They'll give them a title shot. Immediately after that, Clarence Mason then says they're not going to give them the title shot. They're going to have to earn it. Good luck untangling that one. Furnas and LaFon win their match. We ended with an interview with Sid in ring with Jim Ross. Sid says when Jose put his ass on the apron, he became part of the game. Sid offers Shawn a rematch and says he will be a fighting champion. All the credit in the world to Ross for holding this interview together, or trying to anyway. Sid then calls Hart Brett Man before correcting himself. On to Raw on November the 25th, we start with Bret and Owen in the opening match. We see Shawn Michaels in the family home of Jose Thero. For those keeping score, Jim Ross now seems to be a heel again. Same taping, I don't know how that works. After a good match, Bret goes for the sharpshooter and Steve Austin runs out and hits him over the back with a chair. Austin sets for the same attack he gave Baron Pillman by wrapping a chair around his leg, but Bulldog runs out and tells him to stop. Austin ends up hitting Bulldog with a chair too, and then Owen remonstrates with him. The Executioner defeats Freddie Joe Floyd. We then join Shawn and Jose Thero in Jose's house. Shawn, at least at the outset, looks really bored. He says somewhere down the line he lost his edge, which funnily enough is almost exactly the same thing Diesel said the year prior after Survivor Series. Shawn is getting angry here, sticking up for Thero. For someone who's basically had a heart attack 2 weeks ago, Shawn is awful loud and he's pissed off. Obviously in the company of someone who basically had a heart attack 2 weeks ago. Sunny is definitely a babyface these days. She's on commentary for a Rocky Maivia squash match over Salvatore Sincere. Sunny's a bit smitten with the newcomer. Hunter Hearst Helmsley's out on commentary for the main event between Wildman Mark Marrow and Billy Gunn. Mid-match, Hunter goes to have a chat with Sable. Marrow goes after him, blocks a punch, then lands one of his own, but Gunn gets a shot in. Whole thing breaks down until Jake Roberts comes out and makes the save.
Oh. Hey, right, Shawn Michaels, wait a minute. Can you hear me? This is the King.
I can hear you.
Well, listen, I've had about as much of this mealy mouth mush as I can stomach. Jose Thero, that old fossil that's sitting next to you, cost you the WWF title by being up on the ring. Hey, Jose, if your eyesight is that bad, you need to have your bifocals changed. If you have to be that close to being able to see the action.
Thing, King. Understand one thing. Sid says he got himself into the game. I want to make something really, really clear here.
What?
He's been in the game for 30 years. He can stick his nose wherever he damn well pleases as far as Shawn Michaels is concerned.
Oh, boy.
So, Sid, you stepped over the line. Now, if you can beat me skill on skill, if you can match my ability, I am the one man in the World Wrestling Federation that is man enough to shake your hand. But you didn't do that. First of all, you hit an old man, an older man, Jesus, a 62-year-old man with a camera. I don't care what you did to me, but that was uncalled for, and believe me, Sid, you're who I want. Brett, I don't care where I face you, but Sid, you're what I want next. In my hometown, myself and all the people of San Antonio will tear you apart.
All right, let me ask you. Madison Square Garden, let's take you back to the Survivor Series. Were you thrown off your game? Did it throw you off that so many fans were cheering Psycho Sid and sometimes cheering him more loudly than you? Did it throw you off your game?
No, it didn't throw me. No, it didn't throw me off because what I've always wanted, I've always said, I want the fans of the WWF to enjoy themselves. I hope that I can provide that enjoyment. But if I can't, they can get it from somewhere else. I've got another agenda right now, and that is to be the WWF champion. I want the people behind me, but I will not beg to anybody or anyone anytime. I will be the WWF champion because I want to be, and because this man believes me, and the people that are important to me in my life believe in me. And if you're on my side, fine. If you're not, fine.
Seem awfully defensive, and I don't know that you don't have reason to be defensive.
I'm not trying to be defensive. I'm being honest.
Settle down. I just wonder, are we going to see Shawn Michaels, the risk taker, Shawn Michaels, the flamboyant superstar?
You're damn right I am.
We are.
You're going to see me take a whole hell of a lot more risk. I'm going to be more flamboyant. I'm going to do what I want to do. That's what got me to be the number one man in the World Wrestling Federation, because I used to slap people around and kick their teeth in when I felt like it. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. If I got to gouge an eye, I'll gouge an eye. If I got to kick you in the teeth, I'll kick you in the teeth. I'm going to do what I want, when I want. And if somebody wants to do something about it, just try me anytime, because I've had enough. As the old saying goes, and I know you've heard it a million times, but believe me when I tell you, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I can play as dirty as anybody. Just ask around.
All right, so then let me take you to San Antonio, the Alamo Dome. 70,000 fans, and I might add your hometown, Shawn Michaels. It's the Royal Rumble. You have the opportunity of facing either Bret Hart or Psycho Sid or whomever the WWF champion may be at that time. Will you once again reign as World Wrestling Federation champion?
You bet I will. You bet I will. And I'll do it right here in my hometown. I don't care if it's Bret, but I prefer it be Sid, because myself and the people of San Antonio are going to tear you up. Here in my hometown, there's going to be 71,000 chances to see me kick your 6'9", 300-pound teeth down your stinking throat. And believe me, it is going to happen, and there's nothing you or anybody else can do about it.
So we get to Raw on November the 25th, and we, after a match between Bret Hart and Owen Hart, we get a sit-down interview with Shawn Michaels and Jose Thero in the home of Jose Thero. Now, framing this with the news that we spoke about at the top, that in a press conference the previous Wednesday, they had the announcement that the Royal Rumble in 1997 would be held at the 72,000-seat Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas. A lot of seats to fill. So obviously when I spoke about Shawn Michaels being kind of written off for a while, probably not the best idea. So we get to this interview on Monday Night Raw. My initial reaction, as I kind of mentioned in the TV notes, was Shawn looks a bit bored, but it looks like he was just kind of waiting for his moment. And as would have heard either side of that TV report, you'd have heard Shawn's promo that went from kind of ticked off to quite pissed off come the end of it. I thought had, similarities between what we would have heard a year ago regarding Diesel after he lost the title, cut the promo on Raw, kind of cut this pissed off promo. It's like, where was that attitude while you were champion? And Jeff, I kind of watched this promo and went, yeah, where was that attitude while you were champion? This is a lot more interesting.
Absolutely. I think I think even the presentation of how he looked, like his dress, his attire, his demeanor, the way he postured himself, everything was a little more edgier. And similar to when Diesel lost to Brett last Survivor Series, it was all of a sudden he's kind of that tweener, not so nice guy. It almost feels like that championship neuters these guys because they want, Vince wants them in the Santa Claus hat, and I always say, like, Shawn Michaels has the potential, and he's already shown it, to be this generation's heel Ric Flair. He is incredible in that role. They don't use him that way, but when he cuts promos like this, he comes across like a prick. He comes across like he's in it for himself. And I say that both, because I read the sheets and because it just kind of how his persona kind of comes across. I don't feel like he puts over Lothario at all, but you got to move tickets for that Alamo Dome, and if they're not going to do the Spurs seating, they're actually going to do the whole stadium with business as it is. They're going to have to make a lot of hot stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring back like Kevin Von Erich for this. I mean, they're going to need a lot of homegrown names from the state of Texas.
Yeah, look, sounds like they're trying at least. I mean, as you say, there are other setups in that building where if ticket sales don't go as well, they can change things up. So there's that. But yeah, like, the Shawn edge is a bit weird. And Jeff, permission to ask a silly question of Bret Hart's number one fan, but when was the last, like, really successful WWF champion run?
Like, are we talking about, like as a year run, or are we talking business?
Well, it doesn't have to be a year. Just the last champion that didn't finish his title run with less steam than he started it.
Well, I mean, Brett got it taken off of him because they wanted to set up Diesel to be the next Hogan. Before that, you're looking at maybe Warrior.
How far are we going back there?
That would be Royal Rumble 91.
91, yeah.
Because then, you have Hogan's run, and he fizzled because of the steroid stuff, and Flair's run, which fizzled because Savage and, they never did Hogan and Flair together. And then Brett had his run, but it was just placeholder for Luger. And, Yoko had a good run in there. Okay, there's Yoko. Yoko had a good run.
Yoko had a good run. Did he finish better than he started?
I mean, the next night, I think he was pretty much dead in the water after WrestleMania 10, but
that's not the only metric for the question, but it's one of them. Who benefited from? Who's the last guy that really benefited from being champion
Bret Hart.
The end of it?
Bret Hart.
He is Bret Hart.
What, 92?
I'd say 94, 92. I think the way they present him now as the living legend. They called him at SummerSlam.
Bret Hart's 94 run, and I've seen the 94 run, not the 92 one. Bret Hart's 94 run was a big disappointment. Was it not?
Well, I think it comes on the heels of them pulling up stakes with Luger, right? I mean, I think by the end of that, you've got a 10-year champion who's now the elder statesman. I think established Bret's mythos of being one of the top guys. Yeah, I mean, from a run, he lost Bob Backlund, but that whole thing was predetermined to get Diesel over.
Colin, same question. We'll come back to Shawn in a sec. Just on recent WWF Championship runs?
I'd probably go with Brett as well. I mean, it seems it's pretty much like you said, that whoever seems to get the WWF title now seems to suffer for it when they do eventually lose, because unless they're going to be getting the title back within, weeks or months, they seem to instantly take a backseat to whoever the next guy is to challenge for the title, and there doesn't seem to be much planning for the people once they've lost it. So
I think it's just a lack of credible opponents, isn't it? I mean, Brett didn't really have any credible opponents. God knows Diesel didn't. Shawn hasn't really beyond any credible heel opponents. I mean, it's
like Vader, yeah.
Well, yeah. Imagine what they could have done if Vader had been in the WWF in 1996. Imagine that. But yeah, like that seems to be one of the problems, is that they, much like Diesel, they get pigeonholed as this Vince McMahon style Hulk Hogan babyface. And Diesel was never any good at that. Lex Luger was never any good at that, not that he held the title. I don't think Shawn's any good at that. And they don't really have any good opponents, or they're not giving any. I mean, the Vader thing was weird. I mean, the Vader thing at SummerSlam, go back and listen to how we kind of broke that apart a few months back. The Vader thing just wasn't booked very strongly either. From a perspective of, the time to make the guy was when he walked in the door, not like 10 months later, and now it's probably too late with Vader. But this new attitude of Shawn, I mean, I think, Jeff, you mentioned it during the match review itself, like, the Shawn-Jose relationship doesn't really ever seem to have made any sense, because Shawn is this cool, young babyface that appeals to the women. What's he got a 60-year-old bloke with him for? It's like walking around with your granddad. Like, why would you do that if you're trying to be sexy and cool with all the ladies? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And now they're trying to tell this story. I mean, Colin, talk about what you just thought of Shawn promo generally, but even the anger seemed a little misplaced. Like, you lost the match because of your own stupidity, not because of Sid, or that was kind of my overriding thought. Colin, what do you think?
I mean, I thought, yeah, it was a case of where was this sort of attitude when you were champion, but we know that, as you said, Vince likes his babyface, what was said, it's the Santa hat wearing babyface. I thought that he came off a lot more heelish, actually, in this interview than the attitude that he'd lost was there. They put across, Jose Lothario is his hero, and he tried to say, that he's been in the business for 30 years, he can put himself wherever he wants, don't question why he was on the ring apron. Well, you can question why he was on the ring apron. He's a 60-year-old man. What's he doing on the ring apron? I've never understood the dynamic. I get, you can turn around to me one day and say, Shawn Michaels' hero is Jose Lothario. Okay, that's as far as it needs to go. That's as far, growing up, Shawn Michaels idolised Jose Lothario. Okay, that's nice. Carry on with whatever else it was he was doing. He doesn't need the 60-year-old guy to be accompanying him to the ring. It doesn't fit with how Shawn Michaels has portrayed himself, has had his character portrayed. The brash young superstar, really confident in his own abilities, doesn't really need anybody to do what he needs to do. And then, here comes the 60-year-old man like walking to the ring with him every week. It just makes no sense. It's never made sense.
No, it hasn't. And it's, we're going to kind of look forward a bit in a second. It's like, forgive the pun, calling it on rocky ground, but you're going to try and build this storyline inspired by Rocky, and yet I don't think that connection's there. I don't get the sense that the demographic of people that like Shawn Michaels particularly care about Jose Lothario, in the sense that it's not, and here's the other thing as well, it's not like Lothario was around when Michaels was on his way up. Like, Michaels won the title, and then, just before, Lothario appeared right when Michaels was on the cusp of winning the title. It's like, what are you there for? He appeared in those training packages, those montages in the lead up to the Brett match. Like, fine, that made sense. Go back, speak with your mentor, speak with your guy, speak with the guy that you idolized. But then what's he out there for? Like, Shawn hasn't needed any help up to this point, and now he's champion, he does. That all seems a bit strange, and we look forward to this huge show in 2 months' time. I mean, for a company that's not been drawing that well, this is an incredible statement, and it sounds like, one, they're going to try and sell a lot of tickets cheap, and as Jeff mentioned also, they're going to have to pull a few rabbits out of the hat as well, to try and even get close. Like, that they can top sections off and whatnot, but that's a big place. Like, if that's 40,000 people, it's a lot of people, but it's a lot of empty seats. But Jeff, if you're trying to sell 70,000 seats, what's the best match at the Royal Rumble?
Well, I think, Shawn is the hometown boy, and if you just inundate the local market with, local boy makes good, and they really kind of almost redo that childhood dream, but now it's, to get revenge on the guy that hurt his... I mean, there's a way to go along with this storyline to make Michaels look like the hero. He's going to be cheering his hometown. I think it wouldn't be so much as one match as you throw every living name from Texas wrestling and, Lucha Libre on that card to get everyone from that area to the show. Because I don't think the WWF has one match right now that will sell that out.
Shawn and Sid is the better story, but is Shawn and Brett the better match in this scenario? I know it is. But in terms of trying to sell tickets, does the fact that Shawn and Sid is the stronger story make up for the fact that people are probably going to want to see Shawn and Brett more?
Probably. It's probably hot-shotting, though, right? I mean, Brett's just come back. He's still got unresolved issues with Austin. You still have WrestleMania coming around the corner. That you need that ultimate title match. I think a month and a half is a little too soon to go with Brett and Shawn again.
But then you're facing the prospect of trying to sell 70,000 tickets on the basis of Shawn Michaels versus Sid and a Royal Rumble match when you've not got that much star power. Shawn and Sid is not the most appealing match. The thing is, we've already seen it, and it was quite good, but I don't get the feeling it's going to be better the next time around. Colin, what do you think?
I completely agree. I don't think they have a match that is going to sell them 70,000 tickets for a Royal Rumble. I mean, the fans are going to want to cheer the hometown guy. That's fair enough, but it's like Jeff said, you're gonna have to throw every Texas reference wrestler out there, past and present. Yeah, I mean, you think back to previous houses they've had for like WrestleMania. WrestleMania 3 was 90,000 people. After that, when have they ever done that kind of number anywhere?
When have they tried?
When they tried, but I mean, at least back then, you had the Hogan and Andre, the huge thing there, and you got the Savage and Steamboat, and bigger names than you've got now with a lot more history behind them. Brett and Shawn probably is the only match they have where people would instantly be interested because they know the history. But you can't throw Brett in there with Shawn now with his program he's going to have going with Steve Austin. They're going to want to see Shawn get some revenge on Sid for smashing the old man with a camera, even though the fans liked it. That's what they're trying to sell the show on. I can't see them selling 70,000 seats for a Royal Rumble. I mean, it's not like it's WrestleMania. It's not the biggest show of the year.
I don't even think it would matter if it was WrestleMania. Like, the name isn't. It's not the name selling the card. It's the matches selling the card, and they just don't have enough depth.
I think they can manipulate it, though. I think if you mark the return of Kevin Von Erich, there's 3,000 fans. Terry Funk, Dory Funk, there's 3,000 fans. You bring in Mil Mascaras, you bring in that When Worlds Collide Latina demographic, there's maybe 5,000-10,000 fans. You throw in Shawn Michaels.
There's not 35,000 fans, though, is there? You know what I mean? Like, you can do some Texas nostalgia, but I don't think that's doubling the gate.
No, but I think I think you're on your way there versus the roster they have now. I think there's budget. I mean, I think it's probably next to last year the most ill-advised timing to run a huge stadium show since Hogan left. But I guess
I just try to think of the names they've got now that can carry a 70,000 seater stadium show. Like, I mean, they'd have to book the Undertaker perfectly. It's obviously going to go with.
They've been struggling. I don't know their recent house show numbers, but they've been struggling for the last. They don't have anyone that can carry a 70,000 seater show.
That's what I'm saying. That the booking would have to be so perfect and grab so much attention for them to get anywhere near this amount of people.
And I feel 30,000 seats would be ambitious right now. They're trying to double that. I mean, that's the thing. I guess the contingency plan and all of this, and they're going to do a lot of papering, no doubt. They're going to do a lot of cheap tickets. I don't think the Alamodome is the one thing Alamodome's got going for it. It's not the most expensive building. It's for its size, which kind of helps it as well. they're going to work as hard as they can to try and make this work. It just seems incredibly ambitious. And also the other thing as well, as we say, if they do bottle it, there is a setup for that building for Jeff, 25,000 seats? Is that the secondary setup?
Yeah, thereabouts for the Spurs, yeah.
Yeah. So they have an out if it, right, it's not like they're completely done for. But Colin, I mean, if we try and approach this logically, like, I can't get the 30,000 seats, let alone 70. I can't do it. I can't make that argument.
No, it's like you say, when you look at the business and the numbers they've been doing on house show loops and stuff, it's a crazy idea to jump to 70,000 tickets. It's just outrageous. I mean, Shawn Michaels versus Sid is not going to sell 70,000 tickets.
No, and a remake of the Rocky story with Shawn Michaels and Jose Thero isn't going to sell that many tickets because I mean, sure, people in the area might. I just don't think people generally care enough about Thero in this role. But we've kind of said that already. Colin, the prospects of Sid as champion, I think it was probably on balance a good move to get it off Shawn, given that he was just feeling a bit flat. But Sid doesn't leave you many options.
No. Shawn Michaels needed to lose the title to help get a little bit of the edge back that he'd lost because he had gone flat. The fans were turning against the idea of him as champion. Sid as champion, I mean, who'd you put him in with, really?
I guess Bret and Shawn is the answer in short. And
well,
then,
Bret and Shawn. I mean, Bret Hart is probably one of Sid's. You've got literally the two best in-ring workers possibly in wrestling now that are going to have to work with Sid in the next 2 months. So that's Sid's saving grace.
But even those aren't great matchups because.
But no, they're not. They're not great matchups.
But they're not great pairings in the sense that Sid's right now. Like, I don't even like, forget, I like the match. I like those pairings from an in-ring standpoint in the sense that Sid for a competent main event is going to need a guy that can work around him, as we showed this month. But Sid diluted Shawn's popularity. All right, I don't think you'll have that issue in Texas. But we've got an issue next month regarding Sid and Bret. The idea in part, or as they presented it, the idea in part behind the Survivor Series finish was that not only did it help protect Shawn, but it also put a little bit of heat on Sid, or in theory it did. But I don't know that Bret doesn't get booed against Sid next month. That's another problem.
I don't see Bret getting booed by fans against Sid.
Is it much different than Shawn getting booed?
I think the fans like Bret Hart a lot more than they do Shawn Michaels. I think I think they respect Bret Hart more. I just think that
go back a year, go back less than a year. Wasn't Bret getting booed against Diesel?
Yep, but then Bret's had 6 months off now. People have got short-term memories.
Okay. We'll see. Jeff, thoughts on Sid's prospects and his immediate matchups?
I mean, for me, I think they should have done I think Vader. I'd say if Backlund was the transitional champion from Bret to Diesel last year, or 2 years ago, 2 years ago, then this year you do Vader squash match, next Raw, then you have a heel champion, you heat him up again, he squashes Sid, so he's an instant monster, and then you run with him, and whether it's him versus Michaels, him versus Taker, him versus Bret, you have alternatives and a hot champ. Vince never goes with the heel champ, or traditionally always likes the babyface champ, but I mean, I would have booked him to have that, the same way Inoki did in New Japan, where he just comes in and crushes Inoki to start off. I know Vader was injured for his debut, but I think he's the hand you got to go with.
I think he was. I mean, Jeff, would you go with him now, though, or have they done too much damage?
Could you imagine if on Raw they say Vader, Sid for the title, the match starts, splash in the corner, power bomb, Vader bomb, pin? I think that heats him up. I think all of a sudden you've got him and Cornette running roughshod. Sid's what he is. Vader has a lot more in the tank. I think if you squash Sid and sacrifice Sid, I think you rehab him a bit. Good enough.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like you've got something with Sid. Like the damage with Vader's already done. I'm not saying bin him. I'm just saying there's a case against just because you've kind of been there and he fell short. As we mentioned last month, they kind of Lex Lugered him at SummerSlam. When we were discussing about Sid and Shawn last month, I kind of said just go with Sid because it feels like you've got something, and it doesn't feel like WWF have had something for a while. But Sid, like, he solves a couple of problems and he creates about 5 more. But now we're almost in the same position we were in with Diesel a couple of years ago. Not that they've given Sid the title in the same way they gave it to Diesel. They gave Diesel the title with the view he was going to hold the title for, 18 months or whatever it was. But the problem they've kind of got is the same thing, which is you've got this big babyface champion, but you've got no heels. And Jeff, I know what you mean. You could do it with Vader, and Vader might still well be the best shout. Austin would be the other one, although he lost. And if anything, it would have made more sense for Austin to beat Brett, but I guess that's one for another time. But the problem is the problem you've got is the problem you have with Diesel. You've got Sid as the champion now, and you want to put him in main events, but he's not good enough to work main events. And so you've got to put him with the best workers you've got, and the best workers you've got are both baby faces. It's all a little strange, like, it all feels like square pegs and round holes. I don't feel like any of this makes sense. I guess we'll just see how it plays out, but I wouldn't be shocked if Brett got booed next month against Sid. Now, you're not going to have that problem in San Antonio. I guess the final question, Colin, if we assume that Sid makes it through Brett, who wins the Sid-Shawn match? Is that just Shawn has to win that, right?
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind that Shawn wins that. They're not going to have Shawn Michaels lose, hopefully, in front of 70,000 fans. It's not going to happen.
You don't know. And then Brett wins the Rumble, and that's how we get to WrestleMania 13. WrestleMania.
That makes sense to me. Although it really does depend on how they book Brett and Austin.
Or if they book it. In that kind of timeline, the Brett Austin match doesn't happen. And I guess, that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world. If Brett beats Shawn at WrestleMania and then Austin's his big program going into next summer, having done something else with Austin, that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world, actually. Jeff, any more comments before we finish?
My only way to fill up that Alamo Dome would probably be what if they co-promoted with a Mexican company like AAA or CMLL? Well, they try to divert.
They did announce a partnership with a Mexican company, and they could do.
It's would that be enough though to sell 70,000?
That's the thing. Like it's not like AAA are going to Texas and selling out 70,000 seats, is it? I know what you mean, Jeff. Like they should, in many ways, throw everything you've got, all of these extra things you can bolt on the side. But I don't know that adds more than 10,000 seats to the gate. I don't know that that's 10,000 is a lot of people, but out of 70,000, it's not. And it's like, okay, you throw all the stuff you've got at it, you've still got to sell 50,000 seats off your own back. I don't think they've got anything that can do that. I guess we'll see. As I say, if they get to the end of December and they're like, look, we've sold 17,000 tickets, let's just set up for 24 and have a really good show. 24,000 people is not a small amount of people. You could have a show that looked great with 24,000 people. So in that sense, it's not the end of the world if it happens. It's just a bit of an ego hit. If you end up saying, we're going to, they have the press conference, we're going to go to the Alamo Dome, 70,000 seats, and then you do 24. But, whatever. Anyway, that will wrap up this month's show. Firstly, a big thank you to Jeff Parker.
You're welcome.
Jeff, no, you don't have anything. So we found that out last time. Jeff, big thank you as always for coming on and we've learned if you've been living under the rock or you've never heard living under a rock or you've never heard a show like this with Jeff before, Jeff is Bret Hart's biggest fan, or it seems like it. And I am. He is. There we go. And, a first show in, Colin, 2 years, is that about right?
Yeah, I think it has been, yeah.
Feels like it. It's been a while. 2 years ago.
I think the last show I did, we was talking about ECW, WWF, and WCW all on the same show. And it's been a while since you've done that.
Yeah, no, it has. You're right. Yeah, it might have been very beginning of last year, on the end of '94, something like that. But yeah, it's been a long time. One of the originals back, which is it's good to have you back, Carl. But yeah, people can find you on Twitter, kind of bemoaning Arsenal and WWE 2K16. Where?
At Colin Judkins.
Or even WWE 2K17, I suppose. That one. Yeah, you're. That's all I can see at the moment. Arsenal playing tomorrow, so there is that. We've got that to look forward to. Anyway, yes, a reminder as always that you can find us on Patreon if you'd like to, say a little thank you for us, sticking a podcast in your ears every month and discussing the highs and lows of wrestling, MMA, and this month boxing. We're for $5 a month, where possible, we're offering early access to shows. I had 2 goes at editing WCW, or 2 planned attempts to edit WCW show this week. And the National Rail in London just completely fucking failed me both nights. So that got edited about an hour before we came here to record this. So, it happens. Where possible, we provide early access to shows like this and others for $5 a month. Again, if you just want to say thank you, you can do that. You don't want to say thank you, that's more than welcome. You're more than happy to do that as well. But link in the podcast description on our website or on patreon.com/wrestling20YRS. 3 of the shows for you this month. Volume number 2 takes us to WCW, looking at World War III. And God, that World War III bloody 60-man match. God, I went off on that a bit. Volume number 3, ECW, November to Remember, a quieter ECW November to Remember by perhaps normal standards, and volume number 4, as Jim Ross mentioned quite a bit during some Survivor Series main event, Tyson versus Holyfield. We spent about 2 hours discussing that in depth. That was a really good show, that. Anyway, wrestling20rs.com. We're on iTunes. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere, really. The usual. It's all on the website. I've been Bob Bamber. This has been the volume 1 of the November 1996 edition of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.